Since this video is utterly massive, I've included timestamps in the description down below. If you want to jump straight to the Combine section for some reason and watch just that, you can, though I wouldn't advise it because this video is chock full of a lot of really interesting information. Okay, let's do it.
Wake up. Wake up and smell the ashes.
This train is inbound from Level 3 dormitories to Sector C test labs and control facilities. If your intended destination is a high security area beyond Sector...
Before we delve into the different creatures that call this universe home, let me explain some cursory information to you first. Most of the entities that I'll cover in this bestiary do not originate from Earth and appeared via a quote-unquote portal storm. Essentially, a brand new, unintentionally created weather pattern with immensely destructive potential. This powerful force isn't exactly naturally occurring though, and was the direct result of a resonance cascade caused by a group of scientists working at a company called Black Mesa. One of their primary fields of study was teleportation, a technology that they had created through the use of an enigmatic plane of existence called Xen. Within this strange new world were valuable crystals that helped facilitate further experimentation with this new form of transportation. During one of the company's experiments with the strange crystalline substance, something went horribly wrong. A rift formed between Earth and the border world of Xen. Allegedly, nothing is truly native to this odd place, but that hasn't stopped various creatures from taking residence there, and eventually making their way to our home during the previously mentioned portal storms. Humanity wasn't the first to discover this place, and other entities such as Vortigaunts or the Nihilanth have lived here for a very long time, but the exact duration is unclear. As its name implies, Xen borders on other worlds, which means creatures aside from humanity have explored it as well. The only known examples of this are Race X and the Combine. Both of these external forces are independent of Xen, the Nihilanth, and anything controlled by it. The Combine are enigmatic conquerors that seek additional resources to fuel their never-ending campaign. They're interdimensional and composed of many different races that are either willing participants or slaves. How wide-reaching their empire is, how many different creatures exist within the collective, or who its actual leaders are, is a complete mystery. They manipulate the beings they subjugate until they're considered useful. In some cases, this includes augmentation or genetic modification. Race X is similar in that they take control of creatures to use for their own ends, but they're after biological material, as opposed to literally anything. It's also worth mentioning the human supercorporation Aperture Science. This enigmatic think tank is much like Black Mesa in that it was founded upon the pursuit of scientific knowledge. These scientists went considerably further off the rails with their studies and ended up creating their own bizarre forms of life. Sometimes these new beings were sentient robotics, or in other cases, genetic modified organisms. Okay, with that out of the way, let's discuss the first creature. Antlions are a large quadrupedal insectoid species originating from an unknown alien world. Interestingly, Vortigaunts have used them as a sort of livestock for many generations, suggesting they may hail from the same location. The primary reason for this was to harvest antlion extract, a potent drug-like biomatter that greatly strengthens the psychic capabilities of those who consume it. How this substance forms is unclear, but it appears as though it isn't present in every individual, or at the very least not in strong enough doses. Antlion hives function as primitive societies with various castes, akin to some Earth-based fauna. The first phase of their life is incubation in eggs that are placed within combs, which look like a much larger version of the structures built by wasps or bees on Earth. Once they mature, they enter a larval state. Their glowing internal fluids are surprisingly valuable, thanks to the fact that it's capable of healing minor wounds when consumed. As a result, their blood is often employed in medical technology, not too dissimilar to horseshoe crabs from our very own blue marble. In this phase of their life, they're completely docile, but matured individuals will defend their children with violent fervor, making harvesting them quite the challenge. Appearance-wise, they share many commonalities with grubs of much smaller species, as evident by the 3 legs on each side of their bodies. The 2 fangs or mandibles on the front of their head capsule are likely used to inject some kind of venom or suck the nutrients from potential prey. Interestingly, grubs are almost always found atop a yellow substance. It's possible that this liquid is their food source, dissolved into an easy-to-consume paste. The presence of human bones nearby many of these areas further supports that idea. Antlion colonies are filled with spider-like webbing, which seems to be used as a way to store food and create a place for grubs to hide. Though it's never been recorded, it's likely that the grubs themselves are responsible for creating most of or all of this webbing. The various sacs present throughout antlion hives are almost certainly created by them in order to begin metamorphosizing from their vulnerable state and into more specialized configurations. How each caste transitions from grub to pupa to the next phase is unclear, but the most common result has been colloquially dubbed the soldier. These mostly green and highly aggressive bugs are actually blind, but are able to feel even the most subtle vibrations in order to locate their prey. This makes walking above their vast network of tunnels very dangerous, as they're able to quickly and easily burrow up from beneath and maul their newly found food source. This strength can easily be exploited, however. If nearby vibrations are too intense, they can become disoriented and perhaps even pained, making the implementation of thumpers by the Combine quite clever. They attack by stabbing with their front legs, both of which terminate in a sharp point. The front of their heads are adorned with 5 protrusions, 4 of which are flexible and often utilized to perform a sort of bite. The 5th's purpose is less clear, but potentially could act as a biological blade, used to output more damage. The bottom 2 are curved upwards, and based on their appearance, seem to be fangs. Though this bite or sting is deadly, whatever toxin they inject is either not strong enough to affect humans or not present at all. Though they walk on 4 limbs, they do possess 2 additional appendages just behind their heads. These quote-unquote arms are likely used to help them manipulate objects while building nests or collecting meals. The chitinous material that covers their bodies serves as low-grade armor, shielding their internal organs from certain attacks. Beneath the plates, attached to their lifted thorax, are a set of wings that assist them in leaping great distances. With that said, this particular variant of soldier doesn't appear to be capable of extended periods of flight. When fighting them, it's best to flip them onto their backs, exposing the much softer tissue on their undersides. Once upside down, they'll flail about for a few moments, presenting the perfect opportunity to land a killing blow. In some cases, individuals are covered in red and orange markings on top of their typical green carapace, but the cause or reasoning behind such coloration is not known. Soldiers are also very responsive to smells, which can be utilized as a sort of weapon if someone is able to obtain a specific organ from an antlion guard, but more on them in just a minute. This body part produces pheropods, small balls that are filled with pheromones. If you manage to get your hands on some, giving them a squeeze will summon soldiers to protect you. These orbs are relatively fragile, which enables the user to fling them to a specific location, causing them to rupture and paint the surface with the pungent liquid. Any antlions in the immediate vicinity will mob towards the location of the newly created puddle, or attack any unfortunate individual who happens to be coated with the substance. As I alluded to earlier, antlion soldiers aren't the only shape these creatures take, and much like termites or ants, certain individuals have vastly different physical forms to better serve a different purpose. Another such example is the worker. This variant of antlion may not be covered by the same hardened plates seen on the soldiers, but don't let this fool you. They're somehow substantially tougher. Their body structure is roughly the same as that of the soldier, aside from the enlarged head. Their forms are neon green, matching the coloration of grubs, and their thin membranous wings are in roughly the same location as the previously discussed caste, but they're either much smaller or at least appear to be due to the lack of armoring. The jaws of this particular variant are very reminiscent of an ant, aside from the long shafts sticking out of the bottom of their craniums. Workers guard the inner portions of a hive, making use of their ability to spit caustic acidic projectiles at any interlopers. They're capable of delivering a powerful bite as well, and somehow can sustain more damage than their armored ilk. Their function seems to be hive maintenance, and of course an additional layer of protection for offspring. Due to their increased durability, it's best to employ the flipping strategy to expose their vulnerable belly. It's also advised to keep your distance, as their death signals an explosion that launches the same volatile compound that they use as a spitting attack, but in all directions. The only way to avoid this is to somehow lead the creature into a large enough body of water, where they will promptly drown, as antlions are unable to swim. One of the most frightening antlion variants is the guard. Their forms are considerably larger than the other castes, and their coloration is much darker. If soldiers are as their name suggests, then guards are the captains of a particular regiment. These gigantic beasts are employed defensively and produce the pheropods I mentioned prior to help them command nearby soldiers. Though not nearly as prolific, they serve an integral function by protecting key points of interest exist for the rest of the hive. They don't exist to build or hunt. Their only goal is to kill anyone foolish enough to invade the sites they defend. This form of the creature is highly specialized for combat, each part of its anatomy clearly exemplifying this fact. Their powerful legs can not only be used as blunt instruments, but they also carry their bodies frighteningly fast to perform deadly charging attacks. Unlike their front appendages, their back legs are sort of hoof-like, almost assuredly bestowing them with even more speed. The large hunched heads of antlion guards are covered with a thick chitinous material, granting them the ability to use it as a biological club. Sprouting from the underside of their brain holders are a few spikes that serve an unknown purpose. Attached to their quote-unquote arms are bony plates that are used as an additional layer of shielding. Emerging from their backs are 5 feather-like protrusions that can be flexed or straightened at will. What exact function they serve is unclear, but perhaps it's akin to whiskers or large sensory cilia that help them track their adversaries. Needless to say, this variant of the creature can't fly, having traded any visible wings for an increase in strength and lethality. Though guards are deadly, they're far and away from the most dangerous variant of the creature that's been recorded. That title goes to the antlion guardian, a specialized subset of the guard caste. Though their appearance is roughly the same, aside from their lime green bioluminescence, they're far rarer and considerably more dangerous. Each nest has one guardian tasked with defending its larval clusters, where the most powerful extract can be found. Their attack patterns are identical to guards, but each melee strike inflicts anyone unfortunate enough to get hit with a deadly toxin that can debilitate even the toughest of individuals. Bizarrely, the death of a guardian seems to have a fundamental effect on the larva within the nest, as according to the Vortigaunts, its death, quote-unquote, ruins the extract. What exactly this means remains shrouded in mystery. Alex Vance encountered a very unusual subset of antlion worker with a notably different appearance. It's unclear if this represents a distinct subspecies or is simply an alternative morphology, but either way, they're not to be trifled with. Their bodies are covered in small hairs, likely functioning similarly to the hairs within a human's ear. The shape of their mouth is also quite unique. Instead of the weird 5-pronged structure seen on the viridescent soldiers, the front of their faces is dominated by a very obvious mouth, as well as 4 pincers. These brown-colored bugs are considerably slower than their green cousins, but they make up for this with their nearly impervious armor plating. Bullets of almost any caliber will simply bounce away if they're shot in these protective surfaces. That said, their joints represent weak points that can be easily targeted to sever their legs from their body. These fragile areas are made very obvious due to the orange bioluminescence that emanates from inside these regions. If both of their front legs are removed, they'll hobble across the ground, using their wings to maintain their balance. This exposes their abdomen, which, much like their legs, will begin to glow. If it's hit with enough force, some kind of internal combustion takes place, causing the individual to explode, like a hellish piñata filled with candy made of blood and guts. Strangely, this can only be triggered if both legs are removed first. One of the most interesting aspects about these creatures is that their blood is often harvested by Combine soldiers in order to manufacture an anti-Xen growth solution, a liquid that's capable of keeping the strange substance at bay, but more on that later. It's not clear whether all antlion species contain this component, or if this trait is exclusive to the variant encountered by Alex. She also dealt with antlion spitters, a subset of soldier that glows blue and flings seemingly electric balls of cerulean biomass. Their appearance is a bit different too. Each plate on their body possessing a cobalt hue, as opposed to the sickly brown seen on the other soldiers. The sides of their heads have bulbous red bumps, perhaps some kind of glands that enable their spitting attack. And their mouths are... ugh. This substance is not only toxic, but it can temporarily damage the vision of anyone who makes contact with it. Their bodies likely produce an ample supply of electrocytes. No, not the stuff you're meant to consume after a workout, but rather specialized cells that essentially function like microscopic batteries. These biological building blocks are most famously found in electric eels. Though they're similar to workers, they're not quite as dangerous thanks to the fact that rupturing their abdomen is possible before the removal of their legs, once again causing them to burst into a fountain of gore. Antlions are extremely invasive and will quickly overwhelm and infest an ecosystem. Their hive structure suggests that perhaps some kind of queen or king has yet to be recorded, but based on the death-dealing potential of a guardian, perhaps it's best that something even stronger remains a mystery. Barnacles are bizarre ambush predators that began appearing prolifically after the Resonance Cascade and originate from an unknown alien world. Their life cycle isn't as well documented as antlions, but we do know that they begin as spores that eventually attach themselves to the ceiling of an environment. What they look like in this state isn't known, but given their namesake, it's plausible that the aforementioned spore is akin to a larva that free floats through the air until finding a suitable location to spend its life. As time progresses, their size and danger level increases until they're fully grown and capable of lifting the full weight of a matured human being. Both their appearance and behavior mirrors barnacles found within Earth's oceans, aside from their chosen hunting grounds. Ocean barnacles live in and around the water, whereas these nasty suckers prefer to hunt on dry land. Their bodies are somewhat similar to the arthropods they share a name with due to their tubular shape and obvious mouth. The exterior of these creatures is composed of flesh though, and not the hardened calcium casing expected of more relatable fauna. They come in at least 4 morphological configurations, each of which has a slightly differing appearance. The most distinguishing trait of each variant is the number of external spikes that they use to help stab and better grip their prey. During the hours following the resonance cascade, most barnacles observed had 6 spikes, and tongues that were either red or white. Years later, the vast majority seen had 4. In other cases, they possessed tons of a much smaller version of the biological structure alongside the primary points. That said, it's unclear if these represent distinct subspecies or phenotypes, a collection of genetic traits that determines an individual's appearance. They intake nourishment by ensnaring food with their incredibly long tongue. At first glance, this muscle appears to be sticky, operating like a chameleon's, minus the propulsion. Instead, they extend their tongue close to the ground many meters below their bodies and simply wait for someone or something to wander into it. Interestingly, if a barnacle is killed, its tongue seems to lose this property entirely, suggesting they may actually be gripping their targets rather than some kind of natural adhesive property. This idea is also supported by the fact that they occasionally grab human beings by wrapping their tongue around their necks, asphyxiating them while drawing them ever closer to their gaping maws. Once a food source is close enough, what appears to be a secondary mouth extends to bite into its catch. After consuming a meal, they'll often regurgitate undigestible material, such as bones or non-organic structures. This same behavior occurs when they're killed as well. Regardless of how many outer blades they have, their inner mouths are always covered in teeth to complement a powerful set of jaws. One Black Mesa scientist claimed that these creatures live around 500 years, and that in some rare cases, tear themselves from their root when gripping particularly heavy prey. According to this unnamed individual, in this state, they eventually dry out and die. This information originates from a series of publications referred to as Monster of the Week, and I'm very skeptical of their accuracy. The writer seems to just hate Vortigaunts for some reason, and I feel like it colors his entire testimony in a bad light. So take all of this with a grain of salt. If you want to read these for yourself, I've put links in the description below. Go check them out if you want. Remember how I said barnacle tongues don't utilize any kind of propulsion? Well, they do at least appear to be capable of such a thing. This particular barnacle was detached by some of the scientists working in Black Mesa and labeled specimen 1176. A soldier named Adrian Shepard made use of it as a sort of grapple hook during his campaign against the aliens of Race X. Without it, he would have likely died in a final confrontation with the Gene Worm, but I'll further detail that creature in its own section. Though specimen 1176 was exceedingly useful, it didn't come without drawbacks. The creature wouldn't attach to inorganic surfaces, only living ones, making its uses a bit more niche. How Adrian was able to launch the creature's tongue on command is unclear, but I think it may have had something to do with the hole in its backside. Boids are relatively small flocking creatures observed inhabiting the border world of Xen. Due to the fact that none have been recorded on Earth, very little information is known about their behavior patterns or life cycle. Size-wise, they're roughly the same length as a bald eagle, but unlike birds, these creatures don't have any feathers, instead resembling a bat, or more accurately, a ray. Rays on Earth glide through the water, in much the same way boids slowly flap through the air. They produce some interesting vocalizations as well, perhaps indicating that they use a form of echolocation. There are at least 2 different varieties of the creature, but much like barnacles, it's unclear whether or not these visual differences represent subspecies. The variant observed by Gordon Freeman and Adrian Shepard has a gray body, wings that follow the same color pattern as a sunset, and 8 red eyes, 4 on the bottom of their heads, 4 on the top. The only other color pattern was observed by one of Black Mesa's security personnel, Barney Calhoun, during his brief trip to Xen. These boid individuals are much drabber, lacking any of the colorful pigmentation present on their cousins. Their body structure is also quite different, thanks to their obvious tails and what appears to be 2 sets of 3 forward-facing eyes. Despite their wildly differing appearance, they produce the same vocalizations as the sunset boid. Both variants prefer to stay in groups as well, with one individual leading each flock.
Hey, look over there, a boid! No, over there, a boid!
When the original Half-Life was ported to the PlayStation 2, it got a brand new expansion in the form of Decay, which I'll use as a source at various points in this video. When this happened, some of the graphics were enhanced to create an additional selling point for this version of the game. The most notable visual upgrade came in the form of better character models, but this also applies to enemies and ambient creatures. Not every beast was given a facelift, but a few in particular are different enough that I believe they're worth mentioning. For the vast majority, I'm going to treat these subtle changes as phenotypes, simple genetic differences between individuals. So in order to accept both versions of each model as canon, all we've got to do is smear the lines between them a little, and use the gamey aspects of the original Half-Life to neatly explain this away. For example, in Universe, Black Mesa obviously didn't have 6 tuplets running all over the place, but rather the same models were reused to save on resources. Make sense? The same hand-wavy explanation works here. Gordon Freeman saw both variants of each creature throughout his journey. See? Easy. Also, I won't be referencing any cut versions. They didn't make it into a final product, and as a result, I don't view them as canon. Not until they make an official appearance anyways. Fair? Okay. The reason I'm carrying on about this now is because bull squids are the first example of having different models. These very large, highly aggressive bipedal creatures have 6 tentacle-like growths encircling their teeth-filled mouths, some of which have spikes at their conclusions. It's not exactly clear if the red color on these strange appendages is pigmentation or blood from prey. The redness may originate from within itself. Given their favorite attack of spitting acidic globules, it's possible repeated use has eroded the outer layers of their own flesh. Aside from their ranged attacks, they'll also whip the shit out of their prey with their faces when up close. They're also fiercely territorial, lashing out at head crabs, which they seem to really despise. This may suggest that they originate from the same ecosystem, or that they simply adapted to hunting them as a food source whenever they found their way to Xen. Though they have some traits that imply they're at least partially amphibious, they have no problems navigating on dry land. Each bull squid's hide is patterned with leopard-like spots. Both legs terminate in a pair of large claws, and jutting from each elbow is a single sharp bony protrusion. What role these barbs play in their lives isn't known, but it more than likely acts as an additional layer of defense, or maybe they're used to better grip onto a mate, similar to the rough, hooked foreclaws sea turtles have to fulfill the same purpose. Behind their legs is a large muscular tail that occasionally possesses a barb, and almost certainly aids in keeping them balanced. As if they weren't unnerving enough, their eyes also blink sideways. The only time they won't attack is when they're consuming the liquid found within healing pools. The unnamed scientist I mentioned during the Barnacle entry has some interesting things to say about the bull squid as well, but remember, it's probably best to take all of this with a grain of salt. According to the scientist, bull squids are hermaphroditic and have a nearly limitless libido. It's because of this that they will attempt to mate with anything they're not already eating. The scientist speculates that its oral secretions are an aphrodisiac to creatures from its own environment, but for humans it's both lethal and psychoactive. This report also provides an image of a bull squid with a notably different color pattern, primarily composed of bright yellow and black. As their name suggests, chum toads are very similar to amphibians from Earth. Hopping is their primary form of locomotion, they're able to swim quite well, and they will jump large distances when threatened. Each of these small purple animals has 4 legs, a large red eye, a very long purple tongue, and 3 spikes sticking out of their backs. Their feet appear to be clawed as well, another trait setting them apart from the vast majority of frogs and toads on Earth. Very little is known about these creatures thanks to their elusiveness, but it is said that they're a favorite snack among the creatures living in Xen. This could help explain their scarcity. Adrian Shepard encountered one during his time in Black Mesa, and Barney Calhoun saw several on his brief journey through the border world. One also somehow managed to end up in his locker. In some cases, they also seem to be able to teleport, maybe? Controllers, sometimes referred to as Xen Masters, are a strange creature capable of sustained flight that greatly resembles the Nihilanthe in appearance. 2 primary arms with 3 fingers, an additional limb emerging from their chests, and a large bulbous head are the most obvious similarities. Their faces are more akin to grunts, made obvious by the fact that each jaw moves sideways and just above it are 3 red eyes. The structure of their teeth is similar too, all of which jut out from their mouths in a predatory fashion. For some reason, of the 4 chest-armed species, controllers are the only ones that wear regular clothing. Each individual is donned with a red loincloth, suggesting the presence of genitalia. When attacking, they always employ a kind of energy-based projectile that appears to be related to the crystals found throughout Xen. When their targets are far away, they'll summon a barrage of yellow orbs that inflict pain upon those they make contact with. They also manifest larger versions of the same projectile with tracking capabilities. Controllers constantly scream like the little pussies they are. Yeah, fly away, you piece of shit. If a controller is closer to its adversary, its head peels open and a large orb composed of a similar energy launches from the spike hidden in their craniums. These creatures serve as a support network for the Nihilanthe. likely assisting and exerting mental control over Vortigaunts and other subjugated species. Whether these beings are naturally occurring or created by the Nihilanth to act as enforcers of its will remains a mystery. None have been seen since the fall of the Nihilanth, leading some to believe that their existence hinged upon the creature's continued survival, and its death at the hands of Gordon Freeman may have triggered their extinction. Craft are an interesting creature because it's not initially clear if they're even alive. There are a few different shapes and behaviors, but regardless of that, they're always blue on their top side and brownish on the bottom. In some cases, these large manta ray-looking beasts are jagged, having only 4 sides and a single tail. In others, they look a bit more organic thanks to the concave portion at their quote-unquote nose and the more obvious wings. In either case, they simply glide through the air rather than flap. But this strange lack of movement doesn't stop them from propelling at a rapid pace or performing articulate aerial maneuvers. Sometimes they carry Xen troops and deploy them into battle. Craft have been recorded dropping Vortigaunts and in some instances grunts, though I see no reason why they'd be unable to do the same for other creatures too. This functionality is quite odd and seems a bit redundant, to be honest, considering many of the Borderworld denizens are teleported directly into a specific space anyways. Maybe it takes a great deal of energy for the Nihilanth to perfectly place its foot soldiers into the right locations, and these help lighten the load or something. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Regardless of the configuration, they're capable of outputting a beam of energy from their bellies that has remarkably destructive potential. Gordon Freeman also encountered a rather strange version of the creature that appears to be 2 crafts sort of just haphazardly fused together. A few other scientists by the names of Gina Cross and Colette Green fought and killed an extremely deadly variant that shot concentrated beams from above like its cousins, but it also actually flapped its wings. Its body was roughly the same as the 2-tailed variant I already mentioned, aside from the fact that it was quite a bit more rounded rather than having pointed edges. Energy cannons are a form of turret emplacement employed by Xen forces that have only ever been seen one time guarding the entrance to Black Mesa's reactor complex. Though it's clearly shown to be operating autonomously, to what degree is unclear. It may be a simple motion sensor, or it could be a highly advanced artificial intelligence that has aspirations and a family life. I have no idea. Appearance-wise, it's, well, a big silver gun. The business end terminates in 4 prongs, and as a whole it seems to be composed out of a porous-looking metal. It doesn't have any control surfaces, further suggesting it's self-contained, or at least operated in a non-corporeal way, such as telepathy. When it's destroyed, the explosion looks and sounds oddly meaty. Gargantua are one of the deadliest creatures to emerge from the border world. These terrifying behemoths haven't been encountered prolifically, but the few times they have, they've been a force of pure death and destruction. Nothing is really known about these enigmatic beasts, save for their overall lethality. Utilizing their immense legs, they can run at their adversaries at a frightening pace, especially given their incredible bulk. If something gets too close, they'll either be smashed by their blunt arms or pancaked by an even deadlier stomp that also sends a red shockwave across the ground. To enhance the fear factor even more, their eyes, or eye, will begin to glow red whenever they lock onto a target. This illumination could potentially be natural, but given their apparent use of technology, it's likely some kind of threat indication or maybe heat vision. It's not exactly clear just how much of the Gargantua is made of organic tissue, as they all appear to be outfitted with some kind of technological armor plating. The club-like arms I mentioned earlier aren't just great for melee, but they're also capable of opening up and spewing a non-stop flow of flames. The face of the Gargantua is dominated by a large mouth, jutting out of which is a series of twisted and misaligned teeth. Between their huge legs is a set of pincers, where genitalia would be expected. The function of these is not clear. What looks like their Achilles heel is slightly separated from their bodies, for reasons completely unknown to me. Regardless of their origin point, the Nihilanth had no problem deploying them as foot soldiers, much like Vortigaunts and Grunts. Some say that these creatures still exist in some form since the fall of Black Mesa, but thankfully I can't verify that claim. Grunts are the workhorses of the initial Xen invasion. These large, stocky creatures are very deadly thanks to their armor, weaponry, and sheer size. The thick plating that covers their forms appears to be physically attached to them as opposed to simply being worn. It also absorbs a fair amount of damage, so firing at their exposed flesh is the best option when trying to take them down. Interestingly, they share a very unusual piece of anatomy with the Vortigaunts, the Nihilanth, and controllers, a third arm that emerges from their chests. Allegedly, they originate from the same planet, indicating that the central arm is a relatively common adaptation on their home world. Their jaws are comprised of 3 mandibles, 2 that move horizontally, and a third bottom segment. The left piece has 3 large teeth, whereas the right one has 2, allowing them to meet evenly and sit between each other when the creatures are at rest. The sides of the horizontally moving mouthparts are each adorned with 1 large nodule. Maybe these are ears? I honestly have no idea. Above their mouths is a set of 3 beady red eyes that they use to judge you harshly. At first glance, they appear to have digitigrade legs, meaning their joints are reversed, but upon closer inspection, they're actually plantigrade. Basically, the entirety of their foot touches the ground when they're walking. Grunts have very unusual arms as well. One resembles a crab-like claw with a simple pincher, while the other possesses an organic weapon that's somehow growing out of the limb. This gun is likely not a natural part of their anatomy though, as Gordon Freeman managed to get a hold of one during the initial invasion of Black Mesa. Instead, it's an entirely separate life form, but more on it in a little bit. In Xen, they can be seen contained within large pods. It's unclear if they're designed to transport them or perhaps place them into some kind of suspended animation until they're needed. Alternatively, the assembly line look of these areas could suggest that grunts are actually manufactured rather than created through some natural biological process. Some of the researchers working at Black Mesa managed to capture some for study. The nameless scientist from previous entries had some interesting stuff to say. First off, he speculates that their lifespan is relatively short, but given their use on the front lines by the Nihilanth, it's unlikely they're typically able to expire from old age. They have extremely high metabolisms, so they have to feed quite frequently. Generally, this sustenance arrives in the form of chum toads, but if they run out, they'll begin consuming the bodies of their enemies or even allies. According to the scientist, they share no genetic relation to the Nihilanth, though I have no idea how he'd have been able to determine that. They can allegedly survive brief stints in vacuum or highly radiated areas too. He also speculates that they could have been a mercenary race that was hired for defense or was simply subjugated and forced to serve. Supposedly, they also utilize a form of low-grade telepathy to communicate with their compatriots. This scientist also claims that the weapon I mentioned earlier is one of several parasites that complement the destructive capabilities of grunt individuals. The projectiles that are propelled from their guns are said to breed within the stomach region, and their armor is an exoskeleton produced by their bodies thanks to a diet of alien ores. As I've already stated, take this all with a grain of salt. I think this guy is absolutely full of shit. Head crabs are one of the most common creatures encountered after the Resonance Cascade. These 4-legged, parasitic animals attack by lunging at their prey in an attempt to affix themselves to their head. They have no obvious eyes, nose, or ears, but this doesn't stop them from successfully navigating through an environment. In general, these small animals aren't particularly quick, largely thanks to the awkward gait created by their stubby rear legs and considerably longer front limbs. That being said, they make up for this with their ability to jump great distances. Head crabs are ambush predators, and in some cases they'll bury themselves in the ground to hide from a potential victim. Once they sense a target, they'll lunge towards it and couple with its head. Once latched onto a host, the orifice located on the underside of their bodies, likely their mouths, swallows the cranium of their victim. After positioning themselves on their prey's head, they drive their beaks into the skull and assume control of the nervous system. 4 fangs located at the front of their bodies are likely used to inject their prey with some kind of toxin, or perhaps a sedative that negates the host's ability to fight back. The edges of where they attach are also lined with teeth that almost certainly aid in latching onto their target. Once affixed, the person beneath is functionally dead, creating what amounts to a zombie. It's unknown whether or not someone can be resuscitated after this, but given that the way a head crab interfaces with a human body is extremely destructive, I highly doubt it. Once attached, these former humans are now fully controlled by the head crab, including motor functions and potentially vocal cords as well. I say potentially because in some cases zombified humans can be heard speaking, but it's possible this vocalization is created by the head crab in an attempt to lure prey to its location, rather than genuine distress from whoever they're clinging to. Speaking of prey, what exactly does a head crab get out of attaching itself to a person? It's unlikely that this is a step towards reproduction, for reasons I'll elaborate on later. Instead, they seem to use them as a vessel to better hunt and acquire food. If someone were to remove a head crab's beak and fangs, they become docile and completely lose the ability to control a host. Bizarrely, zombification only seems to occur with humans, but this doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering they originate from a place where Homo sapiens don't even exist. Why would a creature specifically adapt to possess us if we weren't present during its evolutionary process? One possibility is that they originate from somewhere with organisms that are similar, or perhaps they're able to more easily take control of a human skin suit. Maybe they would attach to a Vortigaunt given the chance, and the only reason they don't is the two have generally not been observed coexisting without influence from the Nihilanthe. During Gordon Freeman's fights through Black Mesa, headcrabs, zombies, and Vortigaunts exist side by side but don't attack each other, whereas much later this clearly isn't the case. What this means is that we can safely assume the Nihilanthe was not only in control of the Vortigaunts, but headcrabs as well, and when it died, everything under its control reverted back to their original goals, however simplistic they might be. If the body they're in control of is significantly damaged, they'll detach from the host and begin the search for a new one. It often takes a lot to reach this point though, as some headcrabs will continue to pilot their victim's corpse after its legs have been severed. Bizarrely, they seem to lack basic self-preservation, and will wander into flames or other deadly traps. When someone becomes a zombie, their physical traits are modified to better increase their overall lethality. In most cases, this manifests as elongated and sharpened phalanges that are used for slashing. The chest cavity of the host also tears apart, creating a mouth that serves as the primary orifice for absorbing nutrients. After a zombie scores a kill, they'll rip the flesh off their prey with their hands or chest mouths and seemingly consume it. Where the food goes isn't exactly clear, but it's likely funneled upward towards the head crab through the utilization of the host's diaphragm and what remains of their abdominal, the same muscles previously used to facilitate vomiting. Due to the expiration of the host, the zombie's body inevitably begins to decompose, but this post-mortem decay doesn't seem to have any bearing on the head crab's twisted puppeteering. If left alone with no interaction from external stimuli, zombies will simply lie dormant until approached. It doesn't matter who you were prior to possession either. Scientists, security personnel, soldiers, Combine, and random civilians have all been zombified at one point in time. In some cases, the quote-unquote face of a zombie takes on some of the more human features of the host, namely the presence of eye sockets, a nasal cavity, and even a mouth. This is probably due to the fact that a headcrab's skin is thin and that its flesh is simply resting on the holes of its host's skull. It's not clear why, but after zombification, certain former human bodies begin to develop green luminescent tumors. If a strong enough force is applied to these lesions, they'll rupture, creating a miniature explosion that kills the headcrab but doesn't harm anyone externally. The presence of these is truly mystifying, as they serve no beneficial purpose for headcrabs, instead suggesting the existence of some other equally parasitic life forms such as Xen growth. Adrian Shepard encountered a very strange zombie in the form of the gnome, which have their backs completely covered by these growths. They're also considerably larger and faster as well. In the case of a gnome, the line between headcrab and human body becomes exceedingly blurred as the two have begun to truly fuse together beyond what's been observed with most other zombies. There doesn't even appear to be any separation at all between the headcrab and the corpse beneath. Instead, the flesh seems to be melded together. In combat, they'll reach into the enlarged jaws on their chests and yank out a lump of what appears to be flesh to huck at their prey. Many believe that this bizarre form of zombie is the result of prolonged exposure to a headcrab, a sort of advanced mutation and the next stage in its control over its victim. There are some obvious problems with this idea though, the biggest being, Gordon Freeman never encounters them throughout his journey in Ravenholm, an abandoned city that was completely taken over by headcrabs. The zombies there had surely existed for quite some time, and they're completely devoid of any green nodules or other gnome traits. This is why I believe that these particular zombies represent a much stranger phenomenon, perhaps even the presence of a secondary parasitic agent, most likely Xen growth, which may be acting concurrently with the headcrab possession to produce a radically different end-stage morphology. I don't want to go too deeply into Xen growth here though. I think that's best left for its own section, which will be a little later in this video. The individuals that become gnomes are likely being accosted by two completely separate creatures, both of which are transforming the body of the afflicted in their own unique way. This would explain why Gordon doesn't encounter any in Ravenholm. Simply put, there's no Xen infestation there. One could make the argument that a scientist accidentally caused this mutation, or that it was designed by another alien force, but I don't believe that's true. Gordon, Adrian, and Alex experienced an ample supply of Xen growth, and in all cases, zombies were found with green tumors. These pustules may very well behave as a means to further proliferate Xen growth via the dispersion of a spore-like substance, but again, more on that later. Gina Cross and Colette Green fought zombies with growths too, even though they didn't seem to encounter any obvious Xen infestation, but I don't think that affects this hypothesis too much. Other varieties of the creature exist as well. For example, this is a fast headcrab. Their legs are far longer to better facilitate an increase in speed, and their overall gait is quite different as a result. Rather than having 2 longer legs at the front and another pair of much stubbier ones at the back, each appendage is roughly the same length. When in motion, they effectively stand atop their long, quote-unquote, fingernails. They also seem to lack fangs entirely. After attaching to a host, they produce a zombie that's notably more agile and remarkably fast. Unlike other former humans, these terrifying creatures can climb vertically to better pursue prey. Their bodies appear to be in a much more advanced stage of necrosis, but it's unclear whether or not this is an inherent quality of fast headcrab possession or simply a coincidence. Thanks to their need for speed and constant frenzied state, fast zombies prefer to run on all fours, leap great distances through the air, and wail in between attacks. Mutation is a key component when a headcrab converts a host, as evident by the physical changes that occur. That said, the origin of headcrab subspecies isn't really clear. Were these the result of some kind of rapid evolution? Maybe they've always been naturally occurring, but unobserved until years after the Resonance Cascade. Or perhaps, more sinisterly, they were genetically modified and created by an external force. The Combine often utilizes headcrabs as a weapon, deploying the creatures from above while contained in small dispersal pods. Perhaps fast headcrabs were created by them after initial application as a bioweapon. The same speculation could be applied to the improperly named poison headcrab as well. This variant of the creature is similar to the fast headcrab in body structure, aside from the presence of exterior hairs and more pronounced fangs. This subset appears to be ever so slightly more intelligent than its cousins, thanks to the fact that it will hide in a darkened corridor and whistle to attract prey. On top of that, they'll also retreat when attacked. If a potential victim is sighted, they produce sounds akin to an earthborn rattlesnake. Like I said before, the term poison headcrab is actually a bit of a misnomer. When attacking, they deliver a potent neurotoxin with each bite. This means that they're actually venomous, not poisonous. Without an antidote, this chemical compound can be debilitating, or worse yet, fatal. Some say that this trait was the result of rapid evolution, caused by some kind of dietary change, but what they might have consumed remains a mystery. They also appear to be capable of climbing walls, but it's unclear if the skill is exclusive to their subspecies. If they successfully attach to a host, they create a zombie in much the same way as their cousins. The primary difference being that this variant is actually communal. Sometime after possession occurs, 2 to 3 additional venomous headcrabs will cling to the zombie's back. When a victim is sighted, the crab that's in control of the host will reach around and grab one of its buddies to fling at a target. Each of these walking corpses is horrifically bloated and for some reason able to withstand much more punishment than other former humans. What the headcrabs attached to the victim's back are doing is unclear, but based on the lack of epidermis in that area of their body, it stands to reason that they are consuming the host. Armored headcrabs are an extremely odd case where what appears to be Xen growth has actually bolstered the creature's defensive capabilities. As their name suggests, this variant of the parasite is covered in a tough, bulletproof exterior. Though this material has ballistic resistance, barnacles have no problem making a meal out of them. The additional weight this plating adds makes it easy for them to flip over, oftentimes creating a struggle where they have to reorient themselves after an unsuccessful lunge. It's during these moments that an armored headcrab is most vulnerable. Viewing its underside will expose an organ that appears to be a glowing heart. Blunt force trauma will cause it to rupture, and the resulting internal detonation kills the headcrab immediately. The zombies that are created when an armored headcrab attaches to a victim behave identically to standard zombies, just with an annoying immunity to headshots. One of the more unique kinds of zombies is created thanks to the host's biology, rather than the crab's.
What the hell is that? A Combine zombie. That's like a zombine, right? Zombine, get it? Okay.
Zombines are created when a standard headcrab attaches itself to a Combine soldier, thanks to the technological modifications that are applied to many Combine individuals. An effectively new breed of monster is created. The end result is basically a zombie created through augmentation that's zombified by a parasitic creature. That's like double zombied or something. For the most part, zombines behave identically to regular former humans. For example, Combine workers, hazmat teams, and ordinals have no additional properties, but other soldiers do. Not only are these others faster and stronger, but they also come equipped with grenades that they will happily use with little regard for self-preservation. Why these individuals behave differently isn't exactly clear. Perhaps they have more intense augmentations when compared to the others I mentioned. I really don't know. Interestingly, they seemingly still attempt to communicate warnings over their radios, suggesting that maybe their technological augmentations override some of the headcrab's control. Even so, absolutely nothing stops them from violently eliminating their comrades. Bizarrely, in the case of Zombine's soldiers, the removal of the parasitic controller from the host body reveals a complete lack of cranium. How the headcrab is able to steer a body without a brain or even enable speech is unclear. Perhaps this indicates that headcrabs are connected very deeply into an individual's nervous system, meaning they essentially become the brain that emits signals to the body rather than simply taking control of the integral organ. By far the most bizarre form of headcrab is the lightning dog, or reviver. These bluish-gray skinned creatures are extremely fast when running on their bat-like limbs. Revivers also have a 3-pronged tail, yet another unique trait that's exclusive to this variant of headcrab. When attacking, it prefers to fling balls of blue energy that electrocute anyone they make contact with. The source of these projectiles is a strange orb in the creature's tail that rotates freely, akin to an eye. Perhaps this organ is both used for attack and navigating the environment. Though they like to remain at a distance, they'll occasionally lunge at their prey to deliver a series of painful bites, typically followed by an emission of black gas they use as a literal smokescreen. The bottom of their bodies possesses a mouth that's filled with razor-sharp teeth, but it doesn't use them to attach to a victim's head as you'd expect. Instead, revivers will burrow into the chest cavity of a corpse and reanimate them from inside. At this point, it uses its energy conjuring ability to assume control of the body and output devastating electrical bolts along the ground. They'll also attempt to close the distance between themselves and their targets for a melee strike, but simply being within close proximity of one of these former humans is deadly enough thanks to the constant electrical storm that follows in their wake. Revived zombies are impervious to attacks until the creature within must perform a charge-up. During this period, lightning dogs generate additional energy, but in order to do so, they are forced to create a blue nodule on the zombie's exterior. Damaging these will eventually cause the creature to exit the host, where it can be dealt with more easily. Revivers don't seem to have the ability to inhabit a zombie that's already being controlled, either, instead waiting for other headcrabs to die or by simply locating a suitable unused skin. When killed, their bodies will spontaneously combust, leaving behind a cloud of black smoke and the organ responsible for helping them generate an electrical discharge. These essentially function like batteries and can even be used to power various combine machinery. Xen growth is also reactive to this energy for some reason. One of the final headcrab variants left to discuss is the gonarch. This massive creature is the final stage of headcrab growth and may very well be what all of their species would eventually become if allowed to live long enough. Only one of these giant four-legged creatures has ever been recorded, encountered by Gordon Freeman deep in the border world. Each of its massive appendages terminates in an immense spike that it will use to deliver a melee strike to its attackers. From afar, they can launch acidic projectiles from an orifice located at the top of their carapace. This part of their bodies is also composed of an extremely durable material that is virtually impervious to damage. The only way to harm the creature is by attacking the large bulge that sways on the underside of its body. This testicular orb is actually an egg sac that's capable of spewing baby headcrabs forth, a strategy that it will use in an attempt to overwhelm those who enter its lair. Even though it seems to deploy its babies as meat shields, each time one falls, it produces a sound that resembles sadness, suggesting that the creature may be a bit more intelligent than it lets on. Interestingly, baby headcrabs are actually translucent and much more closely resemble the gonarch thanks to the bulge on their undersides. If enough damage is inflicted upon the gonarch's gonad, this pendulous growth will rupture, releasing more of its children and killing the colossal creature. No one knows for sure how a headcrab eventually becomes a gonarch, or if they're all even capable of such a transformation. Let's just be thankful that whatever the case may be, the process seems to be quite rare. Hive hands are the biological weapons that are affixed to each alien grunt's bulky frame. Though it has no obvious sensory organs, it does react to external stimuli. That said, their level of awareness isn't exactly clear. While idle, they can be seen breathing and flexing their 3 tentacle-like structures. As weaponry, they're quite useful thanks to the fact that they can rapidly produce small hornets that will seek out living creatures. Each hive hand can store 8 of these quote-unquote children that they'll eject based on some kind of user input. Once one of the quote-unquote offspring is vacated, it will immediately begin producing new ones. This means, at least as a weapon, it has infinite ammunition. The red creatures that are propelled from the central orifice are small, but deliver a painful sting when making contact with their target. Their bodies are shaped into sharp aerodynamic points that likely embed in the flesh of whatever they make contact with. That said, their rear ends do look like a stinger, so it's possible that they attack primarily with that portion of their anatomy instead. The small wings located at the back of their bodies help carry them at a rapid pace and allow for redirection mid-launch. Hive hands come in 2 different color variations, purple and red. Houndeyes are pack animals that represent a truly bizarre biological creature, largely thanks to the fact that they're actually tripodal. That's not the only odd part of their anatomy, though. In fact, they also see through the use of a large compound eye, resembling something like a fly on Earth. Instead of each facet having its own eyelid, the entire ocular structure does. Beneath it is their mouth, which they'll use to feed on carrion or their prey. Their ridged backs alternate between a light blue and the lime green that colors most of their hide. This cyan coloration is also present in their blood, a feature that can be observed on their exterior thanks to the veins that bulge across their legs. Before attacking, their bodies tense up and begin producing a high-pitched whine. After a few moments, they emit a short-range spherical sonic shockwave that's capable of causing extreme damage to the internal organs of its target. Like many other Xen creatures, Black Mesa researchers managed to capture at least one of them. The questionable scientist I've mentioned several times before supposedly made some interesting observations regarding these animals. According to him, if a Houndeye is isolated from other members of its species, its body will dry up and seemingly die. If they hear the sounds of other Houndeyes, even pre-recorded, they'll instantly revive. He also claimed that captive individuals drink mild boric acid and prefer to eat dog kibble. When free, they're far less picky and will happily consume anything, including paper, cans, laboratory rats, and even human flesh. Supposedly, their sound attacks are amplified when they're in groups. Ichthyosaurs are one of only a few examples of fully aquatic wildlife found in Xen. These extremely large fish-like organisms are highly aggressive, chasing and consuming anything that makes the mistake of going for a swim in their presence. If the large bumps on their forehead are anything like earthbound fish with similar traits, these bizarre bodily growths are probably used as fat storage or some kind of sexual display for mates. Each ichthyosaur's gaping maw is packed to the brim with razor-sharp teeth that jut out of the orifice. Directly underneath this are 2 arms that have sharp claws where they terminate, as well as an additional pair jutting from their elbows. These appendages are used to hold onto prey and to pull itself along the bottom of whatever water source it's calling home. Along with its teeth, these also serve offensive capabilities. By far the weirdest part of their anatomy is the presence of 2 nostrils on the front of their heads. The sides of their bodies have gills too, perhaps suggesting that they're able to breathe both underwater and in the open air. The dorsal fins on their backs eventually lead to an additional set attached to their tails, which end in a spiked point. Black Mesa scientists gave them the Latin name Xenotherus ichthycanthus, which roughly translates to spiny alien fish beast. Very applicable. Jeff is a horrifying creation spawned from the infection of a Combine worker afflicted with Xen growth. If we want to accept the idea that Xen growth has only ever been observed affecting people possessed by head crabs, then this is the only recorded instance of the bizarre life form directly affecting a human being. How or why this infection took place isn't exactly clear, nor is the level of awareness of the host. What the process felt like, assuming the individual beneath was conscious during his transformation, is also unknown, but it's safe to assume it was utterly excruciating. Especially based on the fact that his arm has mutated into a massive bludgeoning tool, and his head has split to resemble a Venus flytrap. The outer flaps of this quote-unquote mouth are covered with large spikes. The entrance of the esophagus has become an additional set of jaws that are punctuated with teeth. Jeff's back is covered in a type of Xen growth referred to as coughers due to their propensity to spew out spores. These noxious organisms cause uncontrollable coughing in any people that inhale them. Perhaps overexposure to these is how Jeff was created in the first place. This monster is impervious to gunfire, and repeated assaults only serve to enrage the creature. It has an acute sense of hearing, but thankfully it's also completely blind. Interestingly, Jeff seems to hate head crabs and will unleash a torrent of caustic vomit onto any he catches. This seems to cause the body to almost congeal, immediately killing the creature. Thankfully, only one Jeff has ever been recorded, but its existence represents a significant danger associated with the presence of Xen growth. Leeches are fairly self-explanatory thanks to their name, behaving much like the Earth fauna with the same title. At first glance, they don't appear to be dangerous, but the real threat arises thanks to their incredibly high population and swarming attack patterns. After the resonance cascade in Black Mesa, they began infesting Earth's oceans, quickly killing off most native sea life and permanently ruining everyone's beach day. On the bright side, their small worm-like bodies are fragile and unable to function outside of water. Two varieties exist, the first of which has two sets of 3 eyes and a stocky form. The other is a bit skinnier and only has 2 eyes. They are seemingly more prolific due to their presence in the oceans off the coast of Highway 17. The Nihilanth is a somewhat tragic figure despite its danger level and seemingly unprovoked animosity towards humanity. This behemoth entity was the last of its kind, having fled from its homeworld an unknown number of years ago when it was discovered and attacked by the Combine. Pressure from the alien collective was why the Xen forces invaded Earth in the first place. They were simply trying to escape the vicious assimilation that awaited them. Of course, humanity was completely unaware of this, seeing the invasion as an act of war, and rightfully so. That being said, the Nihilanth's actions were largely a result of desperation, and it does show some signs of remorse. For example, when Gordon Freeman kills the Gonarch, it seems mournful, saying,
"Done, what have you done?"
It also appears to warn Gordon about the Gman on 2 different occasions.
Alone, not you alone, not you alone. Deceive you, will deceive you.
The Nihilanth seems to taunt Gordon at one point, but it's possible this was actually a warning of what was to come following its defeat, rather than a proclamation of its own intent.
Die, you all die, you all die.
The presence of shackles on its immense wrists seems to imply it was imprisoned by the Combine at one point before it escaped to Xen. With all of that said, the Nihilanth doesn't seem to be innocent either. There's a reason the Vortigaunts view Gordon as an almost messianic hero. When he defeated the Nihilanth, they were freed from generations of enslavement. It's possible that they misunderstood, misplacing the blame onto the Nihilanth when it was the Combine that was truly responsible, but that seems highly unlikely given their level of awareness in general. As I've mentioned before, the Nihilanth was able to exert telepathic control over many of the creatures that made their way to Xen. Vortigaunts and headcrabs are the most obvious and prominent examples. The biology of this freakish creature is bizarre, especially considering it too possesses a 3rd arm emerging from its chest, a trait it shares with grunts, Vortigaunts, and controllers. This once again implies that each of these races originated from the same world. Each hand has 3 fingers and its 2 short legs are rendered useless thanks to the technological device embedded in its underside. This piece of machinery might have been added by the Combine, and perhaps it's what grants the creature its ability to float through the air. Stitches in its stomach imply mysterious surgical procedures, almost certainly performed by the Combine. Emerging from its gigantic bulbous head is a tube that connects to the lower part of its back, but its purpose is obscured. The presence of its flabby little man boobies implies a reproductive process similar to humans, but thank God we never get to see that horror show. Its face is comprised of 2 sunken holes for eyes, 3 indentations slightly above, and a circular, lipless mouth. Bear in mind that the Combine's propensity to modify those they subjugate makes it difficult to determine what traits are naturally occurring or forcefully tacked on. It does appear to be capable of creating and utilizing technology though, as various bits of machinery have been recorded throughout Xen. When in combat, it will launch barrages of energy balls at its attacker, as well as orbs that teleport anyone they make contact with. Somehow, the Nihilanth utilizes Xen crystals to heal itself, but if they're destroyed and it sustains enough damage, its head will peel open like a fleshy flower. Inside, a jagged point is revealed, terminating in a glowing orb. If enough pain is inflicted on this bizarre organ, the Nihilanth will die. This process is extremely destructive, outputting massive amounts of blue energy and globules of a green substance. Though this creature seems to have been an aggressor, and Gordon Freeman wasn't necessarily wrong for killing it, the fall of the Nihilanth represents a very tragic moment of extinction, ushered into being by the never-ending evils of the Combine war machine.
The truth. You can never know the truth.
Protozoan are an enigmatic structure only ever observed within Xen. Their name comes from their appearance, as they resemble a giant version of microscopic Earth life with the same name. It's not even clear if these are creatures at all, because they don't react to external stimuli. The outside of its misshapen form is mostly black with blue spots. Inside is a smaller shape, similar to the exterior layer that free floats within. In some cases, the entire creature is translucent. Snarks are small arthropod-like creatures with a fleshy underside and a hardened shell on their backs. Each of them has one green eye in the center of their heads that's capable of glowing, seemingly at will. In some cases, they also have cute little antennae. Their 4 legs help them bounce through the environment at a startling pace, an act that seems to eventually trigger an internal detonation. A snark's blood is highly acidic and is capable of burning away at flesh, effectively transforming their kamikaze tendencies into a genuinely dangerous form of attack. How exactly this works has never been recorded, but it only seems to happen when they jump repeatedly. This suggests that the motion itself may play an integral role in the eventual explosion. Shaking them up is like opening a particularly caustic soda after it's fallen on the floor one too many times. A soda that can melt your hand off and has a tendency to bite. Though cute, they can be highly aggressive and will use their beaks to snap at anyone that gets too close, especially if their nests are disturbed. Their eggs resemble fleshy orbs and are typically suspended within a thin membranous material. They also appear to output energy or something? I'm not really sure what's going on here. Thanks to their volatile nature, their nests can be collected and used as an impromptu weapon. Once in possession of their homes, individual snarks can easily be retrieved and thrown at an adversary. Just make sure you're not the only one around before releasing them. In some cases, the nests themselves can be thrown onto the ground, and bizarrely, they become ambulatory, albeit slow. After a few moments of walking, they'll burst, releasing a deluge of snarks that continuously lunge at anyone they see until their eventual and soon-to-come expiration. Unless you happen to encounter this particular version of a snark nest. They can't move, instead they sort of just tremble, disgustingly. I can't help but notice that this particular variant of the snark home looks like it has ribs sticking out of it, perhaps suggesting that they sometimes lay their eggs in carrion, or more sinisterly, a living host. I have no idea why they sometimes look like this, but either way, ugh, they're nasty. Tentacles are a truly bizarre organism with almost no information surrounding their biology, origins, or habits. These extremely long, exceptionally deadly appendages have been recorded in groups and solitarily. Their bodies are made of several segmented pieces, each of which is a mixture of green and gray skin. The end of each tentacle is a gigantic bone-like structure that it uses to feel around the environment and obliterate anyone that gets too close. Underneath are 2 additional quote-unquote fingers, and between them is what looks like a sort of extendable suction cup. Despite the fact that they each appear to have a set of large red eyes, they're not used to see. Instead, tentacles hunt by feeling vibrations within their environment. They are extremely aggressive, and the best way to deal with them is by being silent or utilizing a well-placed distraction. Inflicting enough damage on them will cause them to momentarily retreat before returning with renewed agitation. It seems as though each tentacle is attached to an additional biological structure, but it's very difficult to glean any sort of anatomical information from their appearance. They seem to have fins and produce vocalizations that are comparable to whales, suggesting they might live in the water. Without their appendages, they appear docile. They remind me of antlions for some reason. No, not the giant ones, but the larval form of the lacewing from Earth. They both sit in a hole, wait for vibrations to attack, and have structures that jut out of where their mouths are for collecting food. I'm assuming these are eyes and that maybe the long growths on the creature's body will become more tentacles, but that's just speculation on my part. Speaking of speculation, the unnamed scientist that probably has no idea what he's talking about claims that tentacles are more akin to plants than animals. Allegedly, they collect nutrients from the air, and they don't directly consume those that they kill. Instead, they absorb the corpse into a mass of roots, wait for it to decay, then feed on the byproducts of that process. Clearly, this guy never blew one up and observed its body though, so I call bullshit. During Alex's journey through the quarantine zone of City 17, she stumbled upon baby tentacles emerging from nearby Xen growth, suggesting that they may be a strange variety of that life form. This idea contradicts what Gordon Freeman saw after eviscerating some in Black Mesa's blast pit though. Unless the tentacle is actually how these weird animals first take shape, sort of like a backwards embryogenesis, where the appendages form prior to the body. Alternatively, the rest of the creature could simply be buried beneath the ground as their tentacles form. I honestly have no idea. Much like energy cannons, violet crystals don't necessarily look to be alive, but they do have a degree of awareness. When approached, they'll output a deadly bolt of purple electricity that'll fry its targets to a crisp. These bizarre, fruit-like structures have only ever been witnessed in Xen, and it's unclear if they were placed here by the Nihilanth or formed through some other unknown mechanism. Each violet crystal is composed of a stalk that remains affixed to a surface above it. At the bottom of the stem is a mostly purple object, and the source of the dangerous discharge I already mentioned. If the crystal itself is damaged enough, it will eventually explode. Vortigaunts are one of the most tragic life forms ever encountered. These highly intelligent creatures are capable of speech and have a deeply rich and vast culture that remains mostly obscured to humans. Due to their connection with what they call the vortessence, a cosmic force that connects their minds and the lives of other life forms together, they perceive time very differently. When speaking to humans, they can often come off as vague or intentionally cryptic, but this is largely due to the fact that they have some awareness of the future and function kind of like a hive mind. Though they have their own language and simplistic musical calls, they often share information telepathically, but the extent of this ability isn't fully understood. All of this is handled by their brains, and damaging it can not only sever their telepathic connection with the rest of their kind, but it also can break their ability to perceive time in a linear path. All Vortigaunts seem to have a connection with the very fabric of reality, and in larger groups they're capable of slowing time or imprisoning the omnipresent Gman. They're also able to conjure immensely powerful bursts of green energy that can be used to heal or inflict great harm. They can also charge certain batteries, like the HEV suit, with it. Historically, they have a connection to antlions, having farmed them for their extract over the course of many generations. Consuming this biological byproduct can greatly further their connection with the vortessence. They're meat eaters and are often seen consuming head crabs for sustenance, with a particular fondness for their hearts. Their appearances vary slightly depending on the individual, but they're all bipedal and have 3 arms. Sometimes they have 2 fingers on each hand. In other instances, they have 3. Certain individuals have 6 red eyes, others have 4. Some Vortigaunts have hoof-like feet, and others have 3 toes. What they all possess, though, is a 3rd arm emerging from their chests, much like the Nihilanth, Controllers, and Grunts. As I've mentioned several times before, all of these species likely originated from the same planet, but what it might have looked like is a total mystery. The real tragedy behind the Vortigaunts lies in the fact that they've been a subjugated slave race for an untold number of years. Under the Nihilanth's rule, they were forced to fight and kill humanity. After its fall, they were finally set free, but this brief taste of personal agency was immediately soured by further enslavement at the hands of the Combine. Vortigaunts have utterly terrible luck and are an excellent example of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The unnamed Black Mesa scientist is weirdly racist towards them, referring to them as quote-unquote pathetic and undoubtedly possessing low intelligence. He constantly bashes them, referring to their quote-unquote subservient behavior, all the while he directly mentions the obvious shackles placed upon them, and then completely disregards them as being functionally unnecessary, as Vortigaunts are just too stupid. Now you see why I don't think anything this dude says should be taken as gospel. He's kind of a prick. Next to nothing is known about Xen bugs. They don't have a proper name, and they've only ever been observed by Gordon Freeman within the border world of Xen. These small, diamond-shaped yellow creatures flit through the air at high speeds while emitting a firefly-like glow that pulses on and off. Bizarrely, they appear to be akin to a living form of Xen crystal, and were required to activate a teleporter that Gordon found during his battles within the alien dimension. Xen clams may very well be a form of Xen growth, but given their unusual behaviors and seeming sentience, I decided to give them their own entry. Usually encountered in groups, each of these creatures affixes itself to a surface where they lie in wait for a meal to approach. If a food source is close, they'll begin wildly snapping their jaws in an attempt to ensnare their prey. Thanks to their small size, they don't really pose a threat beyond an unpleasant pinch. Within each of these living mouths is a central eye, which is deeply unsettling. Xen floaters are small, enigmatic creatures that have gone almost completely unstudied. They come in 2 primary configurations, the first of which looks and behaves almost exactly like a jellyfish, aside from the fact that they free float through the air rather than the ocean. They're translucent, have no visible internal organs, and possess an appendage on their undersides that appears to have tentacles, all traits that they share with jellyfish. If they absorb nutrients in the same way as their earthbound cousins, it's likely that their tentacles grab, sting, and eventually transport the food source towards its mouth. With that said, they don't appear to be capable of causing harm to humans, so if a toxin is present, we're likely just unaffected. The other variant is essentially an orb that's covered in small tendrils, akin to some kind of extra-large bacteria. Their behaviors are identical to the other shape that I already mentioned, aside from the fact that they're somehow seemingly capable of phasing in and out of existence, or at least rendering themselves imperceptible to the human eye. Xen gnats are small luminous bugs that spend their time floating in areas that contain Xen growth. Primarily, they've been observed in green and blue hues, but it's likely that other varieties also exist. When flying, they emit a trail of bioluminescence. No real behavior patterns have ever been recorded, likely thanks to the fact that they only seem to occupy areas with extreme levels of dangerous Xen growth. Sometimes appearing among Xen growth is the Xen grenade holder. The only reason I decided to separate these from the main Xen growth entry is due to their unique properties and seeming sentience. At their base is a large bulbous mass which connects to an appendage that resembles an arm. Each of these arms has a 5-fingered claw that is constantly gripping a Xen grenade. This odd bioweapon resembles Xen bloaters, something I'll detail in the next entry. The holders seem to naturally produce them. If one is taken, the creature will appear to be sad before producing a new grenade that emerges from the hole in its quote-unquote palm. They protect these as best they can, gripping tightly whenever something makes contact with them. The only way to snatch a grenade is to do so quickly, before the creature can react. Once in hand, simply squeezing it creates a chemical reaction within that produces a clicking sound before culminating in a sizable explosion. At first glance, they seem to be made of the same substance seen on gnomes or other zombies, but for whatever reason, the holders don't exactly want you to remove their grenades. With that in mind, they're likely not filled with spores, as I suspect the zombies' growths may be. The grenades likely aren't intended to explode as a part of their reproduction, otherwise you'd think they'd want them to be taken. Unless they're eggs or something, and every time someone snatches one, they're actually just chucking explosive babies around. Xen growth is a bizarre fungus-like organism that seems to spread wildly. It takes many different shapes, and is even capable of infecting people under unknown circumstances. Supposedly nothing is truly native to Xen, perhaps implying that this bizarre contagion completely consumed the strange dimension long ago. It takes many forms, many of which help it to spread further across a given environment. The only known method of removal is by spraying a cleaning solution onto it that's created by harvesting the blood of certain antlion species. If left unchecked, it can consume entire environments, rendering them uninhabitable to native fauna. Earliest recorded Xen growth appeared in the form of fungus that varies in size. Light stalks that react to external stimuli, hairs, tree-like structures that stab at anyone who gets too close, weird trampolines that launch outward in response to being touched, and of course, buttholes that forcefully eject anyone that climbs into them, just like mine. As this bizarre organism continued to spread throughout City 17, new shapes were recorded, such as villus, wall pods, polyps, ears, coffers that spew toxic spores, mushrooms, webbing, gunk, and bloaters that explode violently when someone gets too close. I'd wager that these also serve to spread spores. Though relatively slow growing, Xen growth is extremely dangerous, and if it isn't kept contained, it could very well spread across the entirety of Earth and convert the human population into horrific creatures like Jeff.
Oh, hi.
Hey, yourself.
So, how are you holding up? Because I'm a potato.
Serves you right.
You idiot. Help me.
You know what? No. Why should I?
Time out for a second. What is that? I've never seen it before. Who is that?
Here are a couple of my first attempts at cosplay. I hope you like them.
Oh my god.
As you know, Portal is one of my favorite games. Oh, hi. How are you holding up? Because I'm a potato. And GLaDOS is one of my favorite characters.
The gene worm seems to function as the leader of the Race X invasion and presents an exponential threat due to its unusual abilities. The immense tentacle-covered body of this creature is capable of converting Earth's natural resources into the elements required for Race X to thrive through unknown biological processes. In short, it can alter the things we deem useful into what it and the other species close to it require to live. Had Adrian Shepard not fought it and sent it back through the portal it arrived from, it would have converted the Earth into a new homeworld for Race X. Does this imply that their origin point was lost, or are they simply conquerors searching for more planets to possess? I don't know, but given the immediate presence of the Combine following the defeat of it in the Nihilanth, I'd wager it's the former. It's likely that their celestial abode was seized by the Combine, and that they were either used as tools for their upcoming invasion, or they fled to our blue marble for the same reason the Nihilanth did. Given the Combine's desire to steal the resources from the planets they subjugate, I have to wonder if the gene worm was created by them, or simply utilized as another slave to enforce their inscrutable agenda. Anatomically, the gene worm is a truly bizarre creature, and interestingly, no one has ever gotten an unobstructed look at its entire physical form. When Adrian battled the Goliath, only part of its body emerged from a gateway, but whatever might have been on the other side is still unknown. Only one gene worm has ever been observed, so it's not exactly clear if this represents a unique species or a singular monstrous aberration created through some kind of genetic engineering. 6 enormous tentacles were observed being utilized by the entity, 2 of which seem to aid in keeping it upright, while the others are used for slamming its adversaries. The 4 weaponized appendages terminate in what appears to be pinchers. 2 medium-sized protuberances, as well as 4 much smaller mandible-like parts, sit around its nasty, distended, butthole-looking mouth. While defending itself, this orifice will squirt jets of a toxic green sludge that burns into targets with caustic acidity. Sitting atop its quote-unquote forehead is a massive spike that is extremely structurally similar to the tentacles seen in and from Xen. Regular bullets don't harm the creature, but high-powered weaponry infused with Xen crystal energy can be fired at each of the bulbous yellow eyes located on either side of its head. Damaging both of these ocular organs temporarily blinds the gene worm, forcing it to attack by summoning reinforcements through a portal contained within its chest, a gateway that's normally hidden by 4 thick flaps of skin. In this state, it becomes truly vulnerable. By firing at the soft flesh behind the orb, genuine pain can be inflicted. This is exactly how Adrian eventually forced the creature back from whence it came. Whether or not it was truly killed at the end of this battle remains a mystery, but based on the resulting portal storm, explosion, and release of sprites upon its fall, I think it might just be dead. Pit drones are the most basic foot soldiers employed by Race X. These relatively short bipedal creatures have 2 large flat feet with 4 toes, 3 located at the front, 1 in the back. Both of what appears to be their knee joints have an additional pointed bit, likely used for mating or attacking. Each of their arms is bent backwards and comes to a sharpened point. This effectively makes their upper limbs deadly weapons, both of which they frequently utilize in combat. The front of their heads is adorned with a 6-pack of spikes that some individuals can regrow and launch at their adversaries. Similar structures can be found on their backs in a row of 3, likely another defensive or offensive capability. Their ass end has a short tail that tends to sway back and forth while they're idle. Their beady black eyes are placed on either side of their heads, an arrangement that could perhaps indicate that they're a prey species on their homeworld. Just beneath their ocular organs is a mouth that's encircled by 4 of what appears to be the same spikes seen across their body, but these are actually flaccid. The entirety of their exterior hide is covered in small red bumps that look like some kind of skin irritation. They're animalistic, but that doesn't mean they're completely averse to using basic strategies like flanking. In most cases, they're observed in packs, and for reasons unknown, are keen on hunting and killing shock roaches. Only 1 instance of pitworm has ever been recorded, and thank God for that, because if this creature was able to escape into the outside world, it would surely wreak all kinds of havoc. Its body and choice of habitat is extremely similar to that of a mantis shrimp. Both emerge from holes, have long segmented bodies, attack with powerful claws, have a tough exoskeleton, and shoot a f***ing laser beam out of their face. Okay, mantis shrimps don't do that, but this guy does. Also, it's like 20 to 30 feet tall. At first glance, the pitworm is somewhat reminiscent of a shock trooper thanks to its constantly twitching mandibles and gigantic eye that blinks sideways. It has 4 primary limbs and at least 10 smaller, less useful appendages that likely allow it to crawl along the ground while it's in its natural environment, which appears to be water, or at the very least some other kind of liquid. The back of the pitworm is adorned with a few spikes, and its head seems to be encased in a naturally produced helmet-like exoskeleton. Traditional weapons may cause it to bleed, but in the end they don't really deal any meaningful damage. The only known way to eliminate a pitworm is by flooding its environment with toxic chemicals. Despite the fact that Race X is said to be made up of multiple unrelated species, shock troopers share some interesting physical similarities to pit drones. The most obvious examples being their short tails, the presence of back spikes, in this case 6, and their 4 weird flappy face tentacles. While at rest, the mandibles located on the sides of their heads twitch erratically in a somewhat unsettling display. Aside from the protrusions in their backs, this part of their body is also covered in a bunch of yellow circles. They are akin to grunts in that they're the workhorses of their respective armies and come equipped with a breed of biological gun that I'll explain in the next entry. Their muscular legs are attached to 2 feet, each possessing 2 toes. They have a couple sets of arms that they use to cradle a weapon or swipe at an enemy. A single yellow eye dominates the front of their heads, opening and closing sideways in a reptilian fashion. It sort of reminds me of a chum toad, though I'm not entirely sure how these creatures could possibly be related. Their pronounced veins are blue in color, and they're absolutely ripped. Just look at that 8-pack. Sheesh. Before reaching maturity, shock troopers are somewhat grub-like in appearance. In this state, they only have 1 set of arms, a few spikes on their backs, and a tail that splits into 4 segments. While they're young, they can be held and used as a weapon by feeding them spore fruit. Once ingested, these volatile growths can be expelled from the mouth of an infant shock trooper via an unknown mechanism. The side of their heads have a set of strange tubes that almost look like biological exhaust pipes, but I have no idea what their purpose actually is. What their life cycle is like, or how they transition from grub stage to adulthood, remains unrecorded. Shock roaches are the weapon of choice for shock troopers. These bizarre insectoid creatures can be held by their 6 legs and used as a gun by somehow forcing them to discharge blue energy balls. These projectiles emerge from the 8 holes in the end of the tubular structure attached to their heads. Each biological gun barrel typically has 2 curved spikes emanating from them, as well as 2 smaller ones at their tip. Surrounding it are 3 large prongs that they often use as a way to defend themselves, or to aid in channeling the energy they produce as a projectile. If left on their own for too long, they die, potentially meaning some kind of parasitic or symbiotic relationship is taking place, and that they need to be attached to another living creature in order to survive. When separated from their users, they'll lash out at anyone nearby, perhaps implying a sense of anger caused by the death of their masters. The thorax of a shock roach is relatively large compared to the rest of its body, and its resemblance to the elytron of an earthly beetle suggests they may have wings, even though they've never been recorded using them. It's possible that shock roaches were genetically engineered by the creatures of race X, and that they die without a user simply because they're designed to, but this is just speculation on my part. The primary reason I'm placing spore fruits in the race X category is due to their relationship with baby shock troopers. These bizarre creatures are responsible for producing the quote-unquote spores that are used to feed and subsequently launch from the mouths of a young shock trooper. When a pod is taken, another will eventually emerge from their mouths after a short time. The removal of these seems to be an intended step in their life cycle, as they don't seem to fight back whatsoever, despite the fact that they very clearly have teeth. This implies that perhaps the destruction of these green balls is necessary in reproduction, akin to seed dispersal from terrestrial plants. Aside from their mouths, their bodies are made up of 3 digits that end in a nail. Between these is a thin membranous webbing that seems to help them affix to a surface. Little else is known about these creatures, and their origins or life cycle remains a mystery.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. And I just want you to know, you make me sick. Yeah, you're disgusting.
One of the most enigmatic creatures within the Race X collective is the Sprite. These small balls of seemingly sentient light were present throughout the Black Mesa compound shortly after the Resonance Cascade. At no point have they ever been recorded inflicting harm upon another individual. In fact, they seem to actually guide certain people along. They also look like they might be employed to help generate the portals that Race X uses as a primary means of transportation, but it's unclear whether or not this exchange is forced or performed by choice. The most prominent example of this was when a great many sprites entered or were absorbed by the gigantic portal that eventually brought forth the gene worm into our world. Like many of the other members of Race X, Voltigeurs have weird mouth parts that flail about when idle. They also have 3 tentacles that hang in front of their teeth-filled maws. Each individual has some kind of innate electricity summoning capability that they'll channel through their hands and use to summon a directed energy bolt that will strike their enemies. This, their large claws, and surprisingly fast running speed make them extremely dangerous. On top of all of this, they produce an immense electrical discharge when they die that will zap anyone that gets too close to the detonation. Interestingly, Voltigeurs are nest builders, preferring dark and damp environments to lay their eggs. When these hatch, the resulting Voltigeur is a tiny version of what it'll eventually become. In this state, they're unable to summon lightning. and it's unknown how long the process from infant to adult actually is, as it's never been recorded. Voltigeurs are fucking weird. I mean, just look at that thing. Their body structure is beyond bizarre, and frankly, I'm not even sure how to articulate what the hell is happening here. They have 4 legs, 2 of which are located at the front of their bodies and are considerably smaller than their rear pair. Between the back legs is a large tail that tends to wag and wiggle about. Their torsos awkwardly sit atop the structure that their legs are attached to. They have really terrible posture, as evident by their hunched backs, which are covered in purple ridges. Their heads jut outward awkwardly, and they lack any sort of facial features. How they're able to move throughout the environment without any obvious sensory input, such as eyes, ears, or a nose, is unclear. Welcome to City 17. You have chosen or been chosen to eat a pile of shit. Yeah, you citizen down there. You are going to eat poopy. Poopy shit. Guys, it was a joke. It was a joke. I'm joking. It's a joke. I thought it'd be funny. Ouch. The alleged leaders of the enigmatic Combine army are the Advisors. These bizarre creatures are an obvious hybridization of technology and biology. It's said that they didn't always resemble overgrown grubs, and that their reliance on technology eventually caused them to evolve into these grotesque forms. Their limbless, featureless bodies have always been seen encased within a mechanical sac that's attached to other bits of useful technology. These include long metallic arms, a robotic eye, an apparatus that covers their mouths, and some other kind of system that takes on the appearance of several blue circular components. Each advisor utilizes telepathy to convey their will, but despite their inability or perhaps unwillingness to speak, they are fully capable of understanding spoken words, as seen when they interact with Wallace Breen, the twisted mouthpiece for humanity. This also seems to imply that humans aren't capable of communicating in the same way, instead relying on verbal language. They're also capable of remote object manipulation through the use of telekinesis, and can inflict harm through a sort of psychic shockwave. Within what's presumably their mouths is a long prehensile proboscis that they can use to violently pierce the skull of any sorry soul they get their prosthetic digits on. With this tongue-like appendage, they're able to pilfer the accumulated knowledge from their victim, regardless of whether they're living or dead. The process is extremely invasive, and if the individual is alive, it results in an unbelievably painful, albeit quick, death. Though little is known about these creatures, Vortigaunts are aware of their existence, as evident by the fact that they have their own unique terminology for them. The details of their life cycle remain shrouded in mystery, but from what I can tell, it appears that their early lives are spent within advisor pods. Each individual likely pilots the crafts until they develop out of a larval-like state, whereupon they quote-unquote hatch. At that point, they'll disconnect from the pod's life support systems and fly using remote mental manipulation. As far as anyone is aware, these vile beings are responsible for controlling the immense Combine armies and using them to fulfill their mysterious, still mostly unknown purposes. How many exist, or what they might have looked like prior to their hideous transformation, will almost certainly be forever obscured. To make matters even more strange, Wallace Breen mentions inhabiting a quote-unquote host body when conversing with an advisor. This could potentially indicate that the forms these creatures take are actually stolen and piloted by some external intelligence, or maybe even grown specifically for that purpose. Advisor pods are large white synth transports that are designed strictly for housing advisors during incubation. The shape of these potentially conscious craft are vaguely whale-like thanks to their rounded noses and the presence of wings that resemble fins. These appendages appear organic due to their unusual shape, illustrating that they were once non-technological creatures. A small green window is attached to their noses, through which a baby advisor can generally be seen. The rear of each pod is where a propulsion system has been affixed, and likely a source of exhaust while flying through the air. Just beside their engines is a set of small antennae. I don't know what their purpose is, but perhaps they're a vestigial leftover from what these creatures used to be. City scanners are some of the most simplistic Combine creations that function much like their name implies. Their primary purpose is to observe and record areas that are under their collective's occupation with their central cycloptic eye. They appear to be basic drones with no discernible agency or any qualities that most would consider necessary to label them as living. That said, the Combine are known for creating synths, creatures that are built using organic and inorganic materials. So assuming they're not alive simply because they're robotic is unwise. A Resistance member by the name of Russell was able to acquire and reprogram one, piloting it from the safety of his home as a drone. It's possible that the Combine used them in much the same way, and that they're linked directly to an operator rather than possessing the ability to fly through the world of their own accord. It's not really clear either way. Though they're not outfitted with weapons, these flying machines can be quite dangerous thanks to their ability to track and even temporarily blind anyone they might be pursuing. This is done by simply flashing an incredibly bright light that's both potentially disorienting for whoever they're following and illuminating for the Combine foot soldiers that might be nearby. Fortunately, their 4 flapped faceplates, as well as the massive machinery behind them, is all fairly fragile, which makes them quite easy to dispatch. Combine crabs, like advisor pods, are another example of a synth, a creature that was likely enslaved, enhanced, and physically altered to directly interface with technology in a kind of forced evolution. They seem to represent one of the many assimilated slave races that the Combine have twisted to their own ends. Whether they're in control of their actions or if they care that mechanized parts have been grafted to their bodies is unknown, but I imagine the process itself can't be particularly comfortable. A commonality between many of these hybridized beings is that their internal fluids appear to be white rather than a more common color like red. These particular synths are the most organic looking and greatly resemble a giant head crab. Not quite a gonarch, but rather an enlarged version of the creatures most prolifically observed. How they function isn't exactly clear, thanks to the fact that the only recorded instance was deep in the bowels of City 17's Citadel while Gordon Freeman was shuttled along via a stalker transportation system. Each leg at the front of their bodies terminates in a sharpened point, connected to which are 2 barbs. These are almost certainly used to stab at their enemies. Between them is what amounts to a face with 4 white eyes and a series of semi-rigid antennae in the middle. Crab synths have extremely large, flat-footed rear legs, between which is some kind of turbine, as well as a bunch more antennae. There's also a large device affixed to the bottom of their carapace that sort of resembles a drill, gun, or perhaps some kind of radar system. Having never seen them in combat, it's difficult to determine exactly what their fighting style might be, but based on their shape and size, they're almost certainly incredibly dangerous. Despite having never fought one or seen footage of such an encounter, I'd wager that they're an integral cog in the Combine war machine. As the name Combine dropship implies, these creatures function as troop transport and are often seen carrying containers with soldiers inside them. Though they don't typically linger in a battlefield, the fact that they can shuttle large contingents of troops and that they're impervious to most attacks makes them exceedingly dangerous. Generally, they're equipped with a rapid-fire armament that's attached to the crates containing soldiers they ferry into battle. The body of each individual is quite unusual, and it's unclear which parts are natural components or were attached to them through some kind of surgical augmentation. Its movements are very fluid, perhaps indicating that they lived underwater prior to their takeover by the Combine. Its arms each have 2 fingers as well as blade-like protrusions that likely aid in its ability to fly. Just behind each of them are a pair of additional limbs that resemble suction cups, which makes sense considering they are what they use to carry objects. Attached to what I assume is their 3-toed feet are jet engines. 2 more are located at the end of an additional set of weird tubular limbs whose purpose I can't even begin to speculate. The face of each dropship also seems to have a large mouth that looks very similar to earthbound whale sharks. In general, their headpieces look a lot like the previously mentioned filter feeders, but the remainder of their anatomy is decidedly more alien. Combine gunships, like dropships, are a form of synth and appear to have mostly organic carapaces. Their segmented bodies have qualities that resemble insects thanks to their 2 compound eyes and other traits that are seemingly designed for hydrodynamic movement, as evident by a pair of fins. They also possess a pair of small legs that don't seem to have any useful function, at least not since their restructuring by the Combine. Fitted into their backsides is a large rotary blade that helps keep the creatures aloft by spinning at high speeds. Originating from it are 2 small structures that, like their legs, appear to be leftover remnants from their originally strictly biological forms. The bellies of these aerial atrocities have been completely reworked and replaced with a plethora of obvious mechanized parts, such as an engine, tubes, and a large chin-mounted gun. Just behind this deadly weapon is a pair of additional, smaller eyes, similar in structure to the 2 located on their sides. The best way to eliminate them is via the use of explosives, as their skin is exceedingly tough. Again, like the dropship, little is known about what these creatures were originally like, and given the Combine's destructive nature, it's improbable that any vestige of what once was still remains. Hopper mines likely aren't alive in any meaningful way, but we don't know exactly how they work, so in case they secretly contain an AI or some kind of organic material, I'm going to talk about them. These ovoid devices essentially function as a trip mine. When they're approached, they leap into the air and explode at the highest point of the jump, or when they impact with something on their descent. Each of the 3 spikes attached to the device will dig deeply into the ground and grip the surface with a surprising degree of strength. To make things even worse, regular gunfire has absolutely no effect on them, making their removal quite difficult. Located on the top of each hopper mine is a status light that changes color based on its state. Green represents idle, red indicates it's about to leap into the air, blue signals that it is yet to arm itself, and orange illustrates that its grip is being loosened. If removed and flipped upside down, a hopper mine employs a kind of internal gyroscopic system to right itself. Hunters are tripodal creatures, and some of the deadliest synths the Combine has ever created. This level of lethality largely comes from their speed and stealth capabilities. They remind me a lot of horses, mostly due to the structure of their legs and the fact that they have hooves that are similarly shaped. Aside from the fact that each foot also has 2 large spikes sticking out of it, that's a little different. These powerful appendages not only help them run very quickly, but they're also used to deliver impressively strong melee strikes. When walking, their legs produce an almost hydraulic sound, implying obvious internal machinery. Located at the underside of their rounded bodies is a set of small fang-like protrusions, and just behind them are a pair of arms that remain folded. These small limbs can be extended outward at a rapid pace to easily pierce the flesh of an adversary. Their bodies are extremely resistant to gunfire, likely thanks to the metallic blue armor that covers the majority of their white flesh. Though bullets have little impact on their vitality, they're extremely susceptible to explosives, high calibers, or large blunt force trauma. Simply flinging a log at a hunter a few times or running it over with a vehicle are the most efficient ways to take them out. The center of their faces is dominated by 2 technological eyes that are vertical from one another. These are able to rotate in different directions, a motion akin to a chameleon's ocular organs. Each orb provides more than just visual stimulus and doubles as a flechette cannon. These barbed projectiles are expelled from the center of these quote-unquote organs and will eventually explode a few moments after impacting with their target. Thanks to their eyes' range of motion, they're able to effectively look in 2 places at once, as well as fire in multiple directions simultaneously. Sticking out of their backs and rising into the sky is a large antenna, a device that's almost certainly used to transmit data to the greater Combine collective. Their biggest strength lies in their propensity to coordinate with others of their kind, utilizing basic tactics like flanking. This bizarre object is contained in a jar within Eli Vance's lab. What it belongs to isn't clear. All that we know is that it was recovered by Alex at some point in time. Some say this object is the head of a creature referred to as a quote-unquote cremator, a Combine unit that's allegedly responsible for cleaning up dead bodies. No one knows if this is true though, as it's never been recorded. Perhaps Alex knows more, but sadly she's yet to mention anything that could illuminate this oddity. Combine machinery frequently utilizes biological materials to function. One of the most obvious examples of this are the guts of certain mechanisms which have disturbing amalgamations of different fauna, like rats or what appears to be antlion grubs. It's not known if the creatures they once were possess any level of awareness or feel pain, but based on their continued movements, even after implementation in a greater mechanism, I lean towards yes. It's unlikely any of these creatures have any real agency though, otherwise the Combine's vast technological achievements would almost certainly malfunction frequently. Just imagine being this rat, for example. Your body forcibly remolded into a disgusting hunk of bulbous skin, only to be affixed to a piece of infernal machinery used to enforce the will of your captor. A truly gruesome existence indeed. I'm lumping most Combine machines into one category simply because there are far too many different variations to mention, and if I did that, we'd be here all day. Much like hopper mines, I'm skeptical that man-hacks have any agency of their own. More likely, they're piloted by Combine forces remotely, but it's never been confirmed either way. As their name implies, these pesky flying machines are designed to hack a man to pieces using their centrally mounted rotary blades. Internal gyroscopes help keep them upright while they move towards their intended target. Manhacks are essentially drones, affixed to a constantly active table saw that endlessly hurl themselves at you to perform the world's shittiest surgery. Fortunately, they're very loud, and the red lights on the front of their chassis makes them easy to spot. Their exterior isn't particularly strong either, making them relatively simple to dispatch, but what they lack in resilience, they make up for an overwhelming number. Mortar synths are another example of organic and inorganic Combine hybridization. They're much like crab synths in that little is known about how they function or behave. This is once again thanks to the fact that the only recorded instance of them was within the Citadel of City 17 in a non-combat scenario. We can safely infer what their purpose is though, thanks to their obvious naming convention. Clearly, they're used to fire explosives at high angles from afar. I can't say with absolute certainty, as I've never actually seen one launch a projectile, but I'd guess they are shot through the large hole located on the top side of their bodies. Emerging from their back ends are two long spikes, a couple of arms with small pincers, a series of writhing tentacles, and what looks like a propulsion system. This odd structure leads me to believe that mortar synths likely take to the air to more easily fire at the Combine's adversaries. Almost nothing is known about the Overwatch voice, a seemingly feminine consciousness that takes and gives reports to all Combine soldiers simultaneously. Whether or not this disembodied speaker represents some kind of artificial superintelligence or simply functions as a basic AI is unclear. Although its voice is strikingly similar to Gladys, but I'm sure that's simply just a coincidence.
Sector sweep. Remote compliance.
Roller mines are yet another example of a machine that more than likely has no sentience or agency of its own. Combine technology is weird though, so you never know. Though their name implies that these devices are explosives, this isn't exactly true. Instead, these knob-covered balls will roll towards any nearby target, extend the bumps across their surface to reveal coils, and finally deliver an electric jolt that deals damage and flings the mine backwards. They may appear to be ribbed for pleasure, but their magnetic properties make them anything but pleasurable, and grants them the ability to cling to vehicles if given the chance. Once attached, they'll repeatedly zap the automobile until it flips. They're intelligent in who they attack, easily identifying the difference between an enemy and a friend. This also means that they can be reprogrammed and used against their creators, assuming you're technologically savvy enough. Once tuned against the Combine, the blue energy they normally emit switches to yellow, likely a safeguard that helps warn nearby units that the device is not dangerous. After being converted, a timer begins, eventually culminating in its self-destruction. Most bullets simply reflect off of their metallic surfaces, but large enough forces will cause them to explode. They also don't play nicely with water, so one of the best ways to destroy them is to drop them into a deep pool. Shield scanners are extremely similar to city scanners thanks to their flight capabilities and surveillance functionality. Like their cousins, they're capable of blinding the enemies at the Combine, as well as being outfitted with large spotlights that help soldiers easily spot an enemy. They differ in many ways too. Most notably, their internal components are shielded by a hardened shell that provides very minimal protection. Inside their carapace is a long claw that extends from the device's faceplate. These arms can carry payloads, such as hopper mines, and drop them onto the heads of unsuspecting victims. Combine soldiers are, in many cases, just regular-ass people. Metro cops are the most obvious example of this, and considered the lowest rank in the overall hierarchy of the Combine's transhuman subdivision. Despite their imposing armor sets, dehumanizing gas masks, and voice modulators, they're still average folk that have sworn servitude to the Combine Collective. Aside from their body armor, they're usually equipped with small handguns, submachine guns, stun batons, flare guns, or manhacks. Weapons that are mostly used for civil enforcement rather than combat. All operate under a strict rewards versus punishment system based on the successful or unsuccessful completion of given objectives. Positive enforcement can take many forms. Better food, more family time, and, quote, non-mechanical reproduction simulation. Yeah, you heard that right. None of that fake robot shit. Real sex, the good stuff. Punishments include things like permanent off-world service assignments and immediate amputation. They are also highly encouraged to take part in memory replacement. Essentially, they're asked to willingly give up one of the most personal things, their minds. Becoming a Metro cop sets them upon a path that, assuming they're deemed competent enough, will eventually lead to portions of their bodies being replaced with technological alternatives. Slowly but surely, this brings them further and further from their humanity until they're essentially an altogether new entity. Though Metro cops are still Homo sapiens, accepting this position fundamentally changes what they are on the inside, a shift that inevitably permeates outward and transforms their bodies until they're no longer human at all. Combine hazmat workers are a far more specialized subset within the lower transhuman class. It's unclear whether or not they've been given any augmentations, but based on the fact that the zombies they become when a head crab couples with their head are wholly unremarkable compared to regular former humans, I'd say no. Like Metro cops, this job likely serves as an entry point into the transhuman arm of the Combine, albeit a much worse one given that their goal is to manage highly parasitic Xen growth. Their attire is quite different, given their job also differs greatly from that of the Metro Cops. Most individuals are covered in yellow or white hazmat suits, with large curved gas masks that utilize an air system which is fed through the tanks on their backs and into their suits. Regular Combine workers likely don't have any augmentations either, for the same reasons I already outlined regarding the hazmat individuals. Their outfits are quite similar though, thanks to the presence of the same enlarged style of gas mask, though they do wear regular coveralls. Their purpose is to maintain machinery or help with general construction. Combine military units have risen through the ranks within the greater collective, and as a result, they're no longer fully human. Though they seem to still experience pain and certain emotions like fear, their bodies have been drastically altered. Generally, this takes the form of cybernetic implants in their throats and abdomen, but it's likely that some of these modifications may be even more extensive than surface-level perception can determine. They also inexplicably begin looking like they're going to start screaming, "Kenobi!" Their bodies are clad in dark-colored armor, and they come equipped with SMGs, shotguns, or snipers. Nova Prospect prison guards have a slightly different armor set, and generally can be seen wielding shotguns, SMGs, and pulse rifles. Combine Grunts are another low-level unit that generally dons white armor and explosive tanks on their backs. I'm not really sure why they have these, but their purpose seems to be breathable atmosphere containment. These soldiers typically wield a genetically mapped SMG that only functions for Combine units. Their augmentations are also far more pronounced, as evident by the massive wires that jut out of their eye sockets when their masks are forcibly removed. Ordinals are squad leaders and are usually seen in command of small contingents of grunts. Their choice of weaponry is usually a pulse rifle, and their different colored armor is adorned with command insignia. Combine Chargers, or quote-unquote wall hammers, are covered in thick armor plating and act as close-range pressure units. They're deployed alongside other soldiers or solitarily. All recorded instances show them possessing a heavy shotgun and a personal energy shielding device that protects them from incoming gunfire at the price of their own ability to shoot. Combine Suppressors represent one of the deadliest soldier types within the transhuman arm of the collective. They're easily identified by their highly durable white-tinged clothing, unique mask design, and heavy machine guns. Though somewhat few and far between, these cyborgs are extremely dangerous and are generally employed to pin a target down with an unending hail of bullets. Though these adversaries are quite capable, none is as problematic as the Combine Elite. Each white-armored soldier is exceedingly durable, and they're most well known for their use of pulse rifles that shoot energy pellets. These volatile projectiles can ricochet off of most surfaces and will vaporize anyone they come into contact with before eventually destabilizing and fizzling out. The most noticeable trait shared by all recorded elite soldiers is the solitary red eye in the center of their helmets. I can only speculate what purpose this may serve, but I'm assuming it's not to help them make friends. Due to the skill needed to receive such a high rank and the disregard for maintaining any level of humanity, these former humans likely have the most drastic augmentations. The level of which their bodies have been altered has never been revealed, but I have no doubt that the last vestige of what they once were has all but been eliminated. So far, we've gone in depth about what happens when a person willingly submits themselves to the Combine, but what happens when they're not given a choice? That's when they become a stalker. These vile creatures are the results of torturous modifications performed by the depraved scientists within the Combine. The first steps of this process begin by severing higher brain functions, effectively lobotomizing the victim. Certain facial features, such as their nose and eyes, are then removed and replaced with a metal plate that folds out by the ocular cavities. The hands are amputated, one of which is replaced with a pronged device, and the feet are swapped out for peg leg-like prosthetics. Internal organs are sucked out, metallic devices are implanted, and worst of all, bye-bye dicks, balls, beavers, and boobies. It also looks as though their anuses have been sewn shut, meaning they have no way to take a shit and therefore no need to consume sustenance in a normal way. Instead, they're fed a nutrient solution intravenously. Once converted, they're no longer human by any sense of the word, and their only purpose is to wander the halls of Combine citadels. Within, their goal is to simply maintain certain mechanisms. When provoked, they grunt and scream but show no signs of being able to speak, the ability likely lost during their heinous transition. Becoming a stalker is without a doubt one of the worst possible fates imaginable, and their existence is a stark reminder of the atrocities the Combine are truly capable of. Striders are the tallest recorded synth unit employed by the Combine, and also one of the deadliest. These roughly 40-foot or 13-meter tall creatures get 90% of their height from their 3 skinny legs, on top of which is a large body. The ends of their appendages terminate in massive spikes that are clearly grafted on in typical Combine fashion. Sticking out of this region are a bunch of small spikes as well, likely serving to add to their skewering attack. Much like every other similar creature within the Combine, it's unclear just how much of their forms is genuinely organic, especially considering some individuals seem to have wiring visible in their joints. In most cases, these hybridized beings are equipped with 2 guns, the first of which is mounted on their faces just between their big milky eyes. It sort of looks like a nose, and is capable of outputting rapid bursts of bullets that are akin to a pulse rifle's projectiles. The other weapon is an insanely powerful Gauss-type gun, and is capable of destroying entire buildings with a single round. Fortunately, due to the destructive potential of the weapon, it takes a few moments to charge up before an inevitable release. It also looks like a big ol' wiener. Before firing the crotch cannon, they usually squat and lower their center of gravity to help prevent careening backwards from the immense force of the armament's recoil. This can also help to reduce the size of their profile and enable them to easily navigate through tunnels or under debris. Regular gunfire has virtually no effect on a Strider. This is likely due to their considerable size and the armor plating that covers their exterior. If you want to take one down, you'll need explosives, and a lot of them, preferably in the form of a rocket launcher with plenty of ammunition. Though they appear strictly technological, it's important to remember that they're at least partly organic, and even possess brains that are similar in structure when compared to Earth-based fauna. Interestingly, it seems like their blood is white, which is a common trait among Combine synths. This substance, alongside the presence of odd tubing, gives their insides a look that's strikingly similar to a Weyland-Yutani synth from Alien. This isn't particularly relevant, I just thought I'd mention it because I couldn't get the idea out of my head. Most Striders are used for combat roles, but in some instances they can be seen aiding in construction. The legs of these are reinforced to better equip them for load bearing, and the spikes normally seen at the end of these appendages are swapped for mechanical grabbers. These claws allow them to grip onto structures and easily traverse across the tops of buildings. Affixed to their bodies are platforms that Combine workers stand on, seemingly controlling or at least guiding the Strider along. Turrets are obviously not alive in any way, but they do have a simple AI and therefore a minor degree of agency. With that in mind, let's talk about them for a bit. Regardless of which variation I'm referring to, turrets always have friend or foe indicators built into them. They're not strictly motion-based, and they won't fire at Combine soldiers if they pass within their firing range. The most common design is the Combine auto turret. Supposedly, these machine gun-wielding mechanisms were made by human hands, then repurposed by the Combine. When detecting motion from a living being, they endlessly dump bullets in that direction until life signs cease. Tipping them over causes them to malfunction and enter a panic mode where they spam some more projectiles before shutting down. Reinitializing one is as simple as placing it upright again. Another form of autonomous Combine weaponry is the ceiling turret. In practice, they're the same as the machines I mentioned a few moments ago, but they're a bit more dangerous thanks to the fact that they can't simply be flipped over to disable them. Ground turrets are even more deadly, thanks to their concealment below the floor and the casing that surrounds them. Each of these autonomous atrocities constantly fires a beam of blue light that essentially serves as a motion sensor. The only way to destroy them is to toss an explosive into their cubby. The final weapon is simply referred to as an autogun, and though it functions identically to the mechanisms I already mentioned, it has considerably more firepower. Autoguns are also powered by an external battery that needs to be disabled in order for the emplacement to cease fire.
The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak.
Listen to yourself. That's your paranoid. You're being paranoid. Oh, you're threatening me now? What are you gonna stab me with? Because in case you haven't noticed, there's nothing here. Oh, you're gonna stab me with this? Good luck with that. You can't pin that on me. You cannot pin that on me. I didn't do... Okay, can you just let me finish? What? Now you're not gonna say anything. Oh, you're gonna give me the silent treatment now. Is that what it is? Okay. You know what? I don't need this. I've had enough. Throughout the vast aperture complexes are a multitude of various autonomous systems, some of which seemingly have at least a minor degree of sentience. The most prolific example are the incalculable number of nanobots. Very little is known about these microscopic machines, but they're at least capable of communication, as evident by a brief conversation Chell witnessed between them and Wheatley. Gladys also implies that the reassembly machine used to build and deconstruct Atlas or Peabody between test chambers has a level of awareness, but I suppose it's possible she's full of shit. She also mentions having a conversation with the, quote, door mainframe, but maybe this shouldn't be taken literally. That said, it does seem like nearly every mechanism within Aperture has AI, and therefore at least a minor degree of sentience. Even the walls, which is creepy, to say the least. Another common Aperture system is the sentry turret. They behave similarly to the Combine's version of the weapon, but they're also pretty different. For one, their appearance is clearly quite unique, thanks to their ovoid shape and shiny white paint job. They also have a single red eye in the center of their chassis, giving them a much more alive look. The most intriguing aspect of sentry turrets, however, is their ability to speak. When a target passes in front of the red light emanating from the center of their bodies, they'll begin shooting. If their quarry walks out of their line of sight, they'll actually talk in a cutesy female voice. They also respond when being picked up, and most disturbingly, they seem to produce agonizing sounds when they're vaporized in an emancipation grill. Pictured thus far is the standard sentry turret, and the most common design, but other configurations exist as well. Another example is the defective turret. These sentries aren't particularly hostile and have a distinctly different, goofy personality. Their voices are more masculine as well, for some reason. Their appearance is a bit different too. Basically, they look unfinished. There are also these weird sideways turrets whose bodies are basically just flipped 90 degrees. I couldn't tell you why. The opera turrets are considerably wider and have never been recorded actually shooting. Instead, they just sing. Only one oracle turret has ever been witnessed. It looks the same as its standard counterpart, but instead of attacking, it offers cryptic information about the future and other events it should have no knowledge of. How it knows any of this is unclear, but its manner of speaking kind of reminds me of Vortigaunt's. Am I suggesting there's a connection between the two? No, not really, but it's weirdly similar. Animal King turrets are gigantic and apparently come in several different patterns. Like the Opera variant, they've never been recorded firing their guns, but they do appear to be equipped with some regardless. The final variation is the Franken turret, a creation dreamt up by Wheatley during his brief control over the Enrichment Center, a dizzyingly massive complex located beneath the Earth's crust. These strange mechanisms don't speak, instead producing strange animalistic sounds while idle. They function like the ubiquitous cubes found throughout Aperture facilities, aside from the fact that they can walk around. This ability comes from the fact they're also made of two turrets with movable legs. Cockroaches aren't humans or created by them, but for the sake of brevity, I've decided to include them in this segment. The only reason I'm dedicating an entire entry to them is because they have two vastly different models thanks to Half-Life's PS2 port. And I did a fair amount of research into the actual real biology of these creatures that I didn't want to cut because it's interesting. The PS2 model depicts what is clearly a regular-ass cockroach, but the original version is weird. With all of that said, these relatively small insects riddled the Black Mesa facility shortly after the resonance cascade. Perhaps this indicates that some of them actually originate from Xen. I can't say for certain, but I find the idea that roaches, or at least a similar creature, made their way to the alien dimension and did what they did best: thrived. It's also humorous to consider that they're completely and totally unaffected by the effects of the resonance cascade. They're not hostile, and they prefer to hide whenever possible, feeding on waste or probably the dead. One of the primary differences between the two variants I keep mentioning is the vastly varied body shape. The originals are decidedly more alien-looking thanks to their pointed shape and due to the presence of what appears to be way too many eyes. This makes me think they might actually be aliens. Their blood is a yellowish color regardless of which version is encountered and is referred to as hemolymph. The lack of red pigmentation is due to the fact that their vital internal fluid doesn't contain any hemoglobin. Though it's decidedly different in its composition, it serves relatively the same purpose as mammal life juice. Dog is not a dog. He's a gigantic quadrupedal robot that looks a lot more like a gorilla as opposed to a canine. This artificial intelligence was built by Eli Vance using whatever spare parts he could find. The most obvious example being the city scanner that was used to craft Dog's head. Though he's a bit odd, he's fiercely loyal to Alex and extremely useful in combat. Thanks to his hydraulic joints and seeming disregard for his own safety, he can easily dispatch the most deadly of Combine units and has successfully gone toe-to-toe with Striders in melee combat. One of his front hands possesses a zero-point energy device, the same kind of technology utilized by the gravity gun and Russell's gravity gloves. Dog wasn't always a hulking behemoth. In fact, he started out quite small, but over the course of Alex's life, she and her father made various improvements to increase his size and lethality. Though he may be highly aggressive to the Combine or anyone else that Alex sees as an enemy, he's extremely gentle when interacting with Alex herself. The two of them formed an undeniable bond, suggesting Dog is more than just a simple machine, but perhaps an example of a truly sentient artificial being. How far this intelligence goes isn't exactly clear, but he's at least capable of problem solving. So much so that Alex trusts his unusual and occasionally erratic behavior, often placing her life in his large metallic hands. Humans! You know what these things are because they're us. We have 2 arms, 2 legs, and an indomitable spirit. Regardless of how depressing or destroyed our environment is, we find a way to persevere, to adapt, and to eventually overcome. We have extreme endurance, both physically and, more importantly, mentally. If a repressive regime seeks to enslave us, you can guarantee we'll fight back, no matter how small the odds of success. A single human being on their own isn't particularly dangerous or deadly, but the world-altering impact they can have, especially by collaborating with others, cannot be understated. We're flawed, often prioritizing the pursuit of wealth or power over the preservation of our loved ones or our world. But we're also responsible for the opposite. We have a great capacity to destroy, there is no doubt about that. But we also build. We create art, relationships, and hope. It's because of this that when the Combine came and defeated humanity's armies, we continued to fight. The right men in the wrong places made all the difference. And in the end, we came out on top, just like we always do. Our minds, our innovation, and our courage are what makes us human. Personality cores are very weird. Each of these metallic devices was designed by Aperture Science and possesses a very distinct, often extremely exaggerated personality that's geared towards a singular trait or desire. It's never been recorded whether or not they're specifically designed to be hyper-focused like this, or if this is simply the result of corruption. Take the Space Core, for example. Its only goal is to experience the cosmos, and it pursues this in an extremely obsessive way, while ignoring any other potential impulse. All cores are distinguishable from other devices thanks to the presence of a large, centrally located eye that can rotate freely to easily intake visual information. Most of these advanced robots are capable of speech and holding conversations as well. Sometimes they're attached together in an attempt to influence the mind of whichever AI is currently in control of the enrichment center. The most interesting personality core is Gladys. She's far more complex than most of the other machines, likely due to the fact that she was a human being named Carolyn whose personality was converted into a digital form. When this happened, she was given all of the knowledge acquired by humanity so far, as well as complete control over the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. All of this information and power corrupted her mind and completely drove her insane, effectively converting a sweet woman into an immortal, psychotic, sociopathic serial killer, with an unending desire to quote-unquote test. This drive was pre-built into the systems that her personality core was affixed to, and was likely the biggest reasoning behind her eventual insanity. If a core is attached to Aperture's mainframe, they're compelled to create and observe as subjects solve increasingly deadly and asinine puzzles. With each completion, their minds are flooded with the AI equivalent of extreme levels of dopamine. The problem is, the personality core then develops a crippling addiction as their circuits build a tolerance to the drug-like sensation. Like many concoctions consumed by humanity, the first high is always the best, and the pursuit for that initial sensation helps drive them further into their own lunacy. Amazingly, personality cores require very little energy to function, and can even be powered by a simple potato battery. It's unknown if all of these AIs are created as Gladys was, but it seems unlikely given their simplistic, condensed personalities and cartoonish behaviors. That said, if a core hasn't completely lost its mind, they are capable of self-reflection, and often have aspirations as well. Take Wheatley, for example. He may have been designed to solely be a total dumbass, but his personality and desires go beyond just stupidity. He has a sense of self, goals, and fears. Generally speaking, cores are confined to a small device that's typically circular in shape. These chassis are extremely durable and are capable of existing within the vacuum of space. The recorded personality cores that had no additional parts beyond the central machine itself are as follows. The morality core is a purple-eyed orb designed to help reorient Gladys's skewed moral compass that ironically doesn't speak. The Curiosity Core was created to be attached to Gladys as well, likely with the hope that its never-ending desire to learn would help drive her towards the pursuit of more beneficial information. The Knowledge Core endlessly recites an insane cake recipe with a bizarre emphasis on fish-shaped things. This core was also created to be attached to GLaDOS, but it's not exactly clear why, considering it appears to be completely corrupted. One of the final cores designed to regulate GLaDOS is the Emotion Core, which also appears to be corrupted, as the only emotion it displays is rage. As I already mentioned, Wheatley was created as a, quote, intelligence dampening core to force GLaDOS into making idiotic decisions after her hostile takeover of the Enrichment Center. This is the Space Core. Like I said, he loves space. A lot. Rick, otherwise known as the Adventure Core, is yet another corrupted AI with an arrogant personality and a lust for adventure. The Fact Core is basically an armchair expert that spouts trivia in an annoying, condescending fashion. Funnily enough, some of its quote-unquote facts are complete and utter bullshit. In some cases, personality cores are attached to additional mechanisms that essentially serve as bodies. In the case of rocket turrets, that body is a small metallic base that connects to a seemingly unending supply of explosive projectiles. They're extremely hostile, firing rockets as soon as someone steps into their targeting beam. The Party Escort bot is another example, but its only known application was in retrieving Chell following her first escape from the Enrichment Center. The most noteworthy cores are Atlas and Peabody. These self-aware robots were designed by GLaDOS to phase out human testing after her repeated failures to kill Chell, seemingly the only remaining survivor within Aperture's labyrinthine structures. They aren't capable of speech, instead they communicate through strange vocalizations and gestures. They also have genders, with Atlas being male and Peabody being female. Considering they're robots, if they break during testing, GLaDOS simply repairs them, keeping their memories intact and sending them on to the next objective. They're also engineered to feel pain, but are unable to express it. This was likely done to create a fear of failure, or perhaps for GLaDOS's sick amusement. Like the Combine, humanity has their own versions of autonomous weapon emplacements. These are almost certainly not sentient, but given their very, very minor level of AI, I wanted to at least briefly mention them. The most commonly encountered is the sentry gun. These weapons function identically to Combine sentries, aside from the fact that they're a bit more stable and are only activated if someone passes through a light-based tripwire or physically bumps into the turret itself. They can identify the difference between friends and foes as well. Automatic turrets can sustain more damage before they're destroyed. They also don't discriminate their targets, meaning they'll shoot anything that's alive and within their sensors. They don't rely on tripwires either. There are two different configurations of automatic turret. The first is equipped with the 3-barreled gun, while the other only has one. Either way, their lack of portability surely makes them more difficult to set up, but overall they're far deadlier. Next to nothing is known about Mantis Men. In fact, it's not clear if they even exist. The only information we have about them was provided by Cave Johnson, the CEO of Aperture Science. According to this unreliable narrator, one of the first experiments done at the Enrichment Center involved melding praying mantis DNA into the human genome. This was seemingly successful, as a later test tasked Aperture employees with eliminating an army of human mantis hybrids. The most mysterious entity within this universe is the Gman. Almost nothing is known about this seemingly human individual, aside from the fact that he somehow possesses godlike power and as a result is extremely dangerous. If someone were to shoot him, the bullets would simply bounce away, with absolutely no effort from him to do so. At first glance, he looks like an average everyday government suit with an unsettling and disjointed speech pattern, but his abilities to literally alter the flow of space and time prove he's far more than that. Though he watches, in most cases, he doesn't interfere, instead choosing to analyze the unaware party's actions. If someone proves themselves to be exceptional time and time again, he will reveal himself in a moment of need to quote-unquote save them. Thanks to his powers over reality, he can simply pluck them out of harm's way and transport them to a place in between. The G-Man can freely teleport to Xen and Earth, but by far the most mysterious location he brings people is a seemingly infinite void of pure white or black. From here, he can alter someone's perception by overlaying visions onto their eyes or simply adding familiar props in the emptiness beside them. Once isolated, he will offer them a job and the illusion of choice regarding whether or not to accept it. Being hired means remaining in stasis until he has need for you, but given the circumstances that generally occur prior, most of the times people don't really have a choice at all. His goals are beyond inscrutable, but he does seem to take pleasure in toying with his employees. As I said before, his speech frequently hitches in a way that makes it seem as though he's actively trying to remember how to be human. Perhaps even more interestingly is his occasional mention of his employers, implying that someone or something even more powerful exists above him. A frightening thought, considering he's been seen pausing.
I see you.
time and reversing events that have already occurred, assuming they don't conflict with his enigmatic agenda. Though he has expressed being forced to abide by specific rules when engaging with the world, he does occasionally show contempt for whoever seems to be enforcing them, and will often do things of his own accord, regardless of their wishes. A select few human beings aren't the only ones aware of his existence. The Nihilanth seemingly knew of his presence, and the Vortigaunts literally interact with him directly by using their unexplainable powers to manipulate the Vortessence. After the Citadel in City 17 was destroyed, Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance were plucked from the tower's apex as it exploded. Gman attempted to place Gordon into stasis afterwards, but the Vortigaunts somehow caught wind of this and intervened. By utilizing their connection with the fabric of reality, they were able to create a barrier of sorts that not only transported Gordon and Alex safely to the bottom of the collapsing building, but also kept the G-Man from holding them hostage. Sometime later, Alex was gravely wounded, and the Vortigaunts were forced to help her survive. In so doing, their concentration was broken, and the barrier they had created to contain the G-Man fell. The Combine were also aware of his presence and deemed him such a powerful threat that they constructed a gigantic prison cell around him. By siphoning power off of many Vortigaunts, they were able to contain him in a small bubble of broken time. As far as we know, the only goal he and his mysterious interdimensional employers had was to control the border world of Xen, but to what end remains obscured. To achieve this and whatever else he may be attempting to do, he periodically nudges certain individuals in the right direction. The crystal that caused the resonance cascade and sent Gordon Freeman on his journey through Xen is implied to have been given to Black Mesa by the G-Man. The advisor that killed Eli Vance was eliminated through the manipulation of time by Alex, who was enabled by G-Man's power. Adrian Shepard was hopelessly stuck in a self-destructing room that would surely lead to his end, but the G-Man freed him moments before his death. All of these actions were moves in a game of chess where remarkable human beings are treated as mere pawns. Like a grandmaster though, the plan, the strategy behind each movement on the board is done to influence additional actions so far in advance that seeing the checkmate is impossible. Aside from all of this, no one knows why he does the things he does. His true identity has never been revealed, and it's not even clear if he's actually human. One of the final sections in this video is a quick list containing all of the boring animals depicted throughout this universe. All that means is that the following creatures have very little information surrounding them or have only been briefly mentioned. This list does not include animals inferred to exist based on sound effects. For all we know, any of those noises could be a Combine radio in the bush or something. Very little is known about the military androids Gladys mentions. All that's ever been said is that they're a thing that exists and that they are being tested within the Enrichment Center. I suppose it's possible that Atlas and Peabody fit into this category, but I don't know. Penguins in opposing force multiplayer are used as grenades. Wow, that is fucked up. Crow, gull, rat, pigeon, literally barnacle, a fly, cattle, body lice, crab lice, reticulated python, red-tailed boa, tarantula, green iguana, sharp-mouthed lizard, rhinoceros iguana, green anole, Komodo dragon, silverback gorilla, gray partridge, great cormorant, gyrafalcon, moon jelly, lion's mane jellyfish, arapaima, brown marbled grouper, red-bellied piranha, humphead wrasse, giant Pacific octopus, humu nu kunu kua pua, coconut crab, grunt sculpin, giraffe, black-crested bulbul, large-scaled pit viper, Bengal fox, chinkara, otter, rhinoceros, elephant, gaur, Bengal tiger, zebra, weaver ant, red fire ant, random light bugs, various fish, various birds, various monkeys, T-Rex, eagle, children's drawings, I guess. I'm only including these as a segue to explain that I won't be talking about various artistic representations of animals because art is certainly not indicative of what's literally real. Tick, dog, deer, pig, turkey, lion, cat, praying mantis, shark, chicken, goose, another goose, I think, some kind of sparrow, bee, sheep, rabbit, horse, goat, black bear. The Enrichment Center test subject application process contains an utterly massive list of 1,345 animals that I will not be reading out. Allegedly worms, the weird shit Breen mentions towards the end of Half-Life 2. And human clones, maybe. I don't know, I have that in my notes and I can't remember where I heard it. Aperture is a company full of insane people with seemingly infinite pocketbooks. In one of their never-ending experiments, they decided to outsource the creation of new test chambers to alternate universes. Basically, they aim to trick the other parallel apertures to design them, then simply steal the finished product. I guess this was somewhat successful because Cave Johnson mentions and seems to interact with a number of different Earths. Travelers in other realities take the form of bendies, simplistic, flat, black humanoids. In Aperture's path across the multiverse, they encountered a universe where people have their heads inside out, a sentient cloud that served as the governing body of Earth. It will leech off your skin. Giant birds, fish society, human fish society, octopus society, ant society, a universe with lobsters and whatever creatures they make their fish sticks out of, usually egg. A half-man, half-machine police officer, also referred to as robot cop. Man mantises. In this universe, the dominating species isn't humanity, but rather intelligent mantis people. They made man mantises, not mantis men. Blarkbarg, a mysterious creature which, quote, produces seeds that detach from her exoskeleton at high speeds in search of human hosts. Aperture made telekinetic people with the ability to psychically burst another individual's head. A version of Cave Johnson that died and was resurrected into a computer, kin to GLaDOS. Basically, he goes crazy, just like she does. Paranormal phenomena, including witches, magicians, and tiny demons, one of which lives in Cave Johnson's mouth. Alien monsters capable of body-swapping employees and replacing them with communist replicas. A universe in which Cave Johnson and Aperture accidentally transformed themselves into beings of pure light. Literally Godzilla, hatched from eggs. In one portion of the multiverse, Cave Johnson is literally Earth, as in the entire planet. That's not the only multiversal weirdness though. A few other questionably canon instances exist, the first of which is the Steam VR tutorial. This small pocket dimension is used to teach about the fundamental aspects of playing VR video games and contains at least one functional personality core as well as bendies. The lab is a series of several different pocket universes that all have differing denizens and properties. Within the hub is the playable character, Bendies and Fetchbot, a robotic dog personality core. Postcards has birds throughout its various Earth-based environments. Zortex 26XX is packed to the brim with drones of varying sizes and configurations. Slingshot is loaded with personality cores. Longbow has a bunch of fragile bendies. Robot Repair has personality cores like Atlas, Peabody, and GLaDOS, as well as mini bendies and a tiny little baby turret. The mini solar system might have life, but all of the planets are so small that it's impossible to be certain. The human body scan is literally just a 3D model of a person, so humans again, I guess. The secret shop is very weird. It's actually a small glimpse into the universe of Dota, but I'm not going to name every creature from those games. I'll just briefly mention all of the creatures within the secret shop itself from the perspective of someone who knows absolutely nothing about these games. I've never played them. The fat humanoid guy has a tentacle in his pouch pocket. No, he's not just happy to see me. Bats, unknown eyeballs, mouse hole creature, very angry sentient book, butterfly, tiny octopus, weird little dragon guy with a fish in its mouth, floor cage thing, mounted head animal, frog, parrot, magic carpet thing, and big monster! Moondust Knuckles was created as a tech demo to show off the capabilities of Valve's fancy Knuckles controllers. In this weird little alternate universe thing, or whatever, you're in the shoes of a giant robot that's sent to the moon alongside a bunch of these other mechanized beings that are referred to as Joe Jeffs. There's also these weird-shaped turrets. Aperture Lab has another robotic protagonist, as well as 4 small personality cores with arms this time. In the Desk Job universe, Cave Johnson became a weird AI-type entity. Aperture also unintentionally created intelligent praying mantis that built a society in a small section of the facility. Giant chickens are a thing here too. This universe also has personality cores, other Aperture systems, and most importantly, a toilet turret. LEGO Dimensions is where things start to get a little wacky and ventures into almost certainly not canon in any way, including through the multiverse territory. I'll still talk about it as briefly as I can though. This game is jam-packed with characters from tons of different universes, each of which contains a shitload of different creatures, but the only reason it's relevant here is because Portal is involved. Not only is there a bunch of themed levels, but Chell and GLaDOS make an appearance. This doesn't mean I'm going to launch into a full-fledged bestiary covering every creature from every featured universe. That would be ridiculous. What I will do, however, is tell you what playable characters there are, and what universe they hail from. There are some other characters depicted that you don't play as too, but I don't feel like looking through every level to find them, so this will have to suffice. Even condensed like this, there's a lot, so I'm gonna move as quickly as I can. Representing the Brick Folk is Wild Style, Chris Pratt, Bad Cop, Chase McCain, and Benny. This is Unikitty. DC Comics plays a large role in this game, namely thanks to the inclusion of Batman, who's just a regular dude. Also included is a woman who can never remember where she parked her jet. A cyborg, another cyborg, but this one is stupid. 2 of the deadliest clowns ever, an overpowered alien with a deadly crystal allergy, a fish controlling water dude, a brick house in human form. This is Green Arrow. I'm assuming he shoots arrows that are green. Supergirl is like Superman, but she's different because she's a girl. This loser follows Batman around. This loser doesn't follow Batman around. Batgirl is not Batman. Here's Batman again, but dumber. Here's Batman again, but cooler. Goth, ditz, and a green guy. Gandalf! Yes, Gandalf! Also a malnourished hobbit, a well-nourished dwarf, and a fucking elf. There's nothing interesting to say about Marty McFly or Doc Brown. Sorry, guys. Yellow people! I swear I'm not being racist. I mean literal yellow people. Specifically Bart Simpson, Homer Simpson, and Krusty the Clown, who's not really yellow, I guess. Here's Chris Pratt again, alongside some random dude with a cattle prod.
Roro Raggy, I'm a rego.
Like, me too, Scoob. Kragger, Eris, and Lavel. Don't ask me what's going on because I don't know. A musical. Here's the same goddamn Time Lord looking like 13 different dudes. Iron Man, Kai, Cole, Jay, Nya, Zane, Lloyd, Sensei Wu. Jesus, why am I doing this? Who you gonna call? These motherfuckers, of course. Here's a dude made out of candy. Here's a dude made out of green shit. Ew, who the hell invited you for? The most iconic character of all time from any franchise ever. Gamer Kid. Finn the Human is a human. He's awesome though. Love this guy. Fern is an alternate reality Finn that got turned into grass. No, I'm serious. This is Marcus Phoenix, but happy-go-lucky and with the same power set as Reed Richards. Fuck you. Daddy, why did you eat my fries? Ethan Hunt and Franz Krieger are just people, right? I've never seen these movies. Potter. A dude that got really shitty cosmetic surgery. A know-it-all. An animal in a human costume. Ineptitude. The chick from Alien Covenant that probably gets violated by Michael Fassbender. And her sister. The goddamn A-Team. Sega! A cute little guy and his disgusting son. A friend to the Vortigaunts. Michael Knight? Some of these are so weird, like clearly LEGO's target audience has no idea who this is, right? A man with severe physical deformities. And children. Create your own lab-grown GMO kids with only 4 simple ingredients. Bloody Mary, but if she was a creepy old pervert. Originally, I was going to watch some playthroughs of all the level packs of LEGO Dimensions to spot and take note of every creature I saw, but the more I wrote for this section, the more I thought that was stupid. Playable characters is all you're getting, let's move on now. Does anybody remember when Skyrim got a crossover with Portal in the form of the officially released workshop mod Fall of the Space Corps Volume 1? No? Well, I do. Remember, this is a bestiary, so I gotta mention dragons and shit. I'm not naming everything in the Elder Scrolls though, hell no, that's its own video, one that I am terrified to even think about making. Gladys helped a bunch of dudes play poker once, most notably Claptrap, Ash Williams, Sam, and Brock Sampson. There's something so hilariously absurd about officially licensed interactions between Gladys, Ash Williams, and Claptrap. We live in a strange timeline. Also, this guy is from Monkey Island, which is narratively connected to both Sea of Thieves and Pirates of the Caribbean. Quite the can of worms, trust me. Evil Genius 2 has a Portal level pack. That's all I have to say. Escape Simulator has a Portal level pack. That's all I have to say. Defense Grid has a Portal level pack. That is all I have to say. Zen Pinball 2 has a Portal level pack. Next. You'll never guess, but the ball? Yeah, a Portal level pack. I don't know anything about this game or its universe, and I'm not gonna find out for this video. There are a number of other minor crossovers with characters and cosmetics in other games too, but this video is a bestiary, goddammit. I'm not talking about them. Whew, okay, that's it. I'm done, but don't go away just yet, please. I need to ask you a quick favor. Can you like this video, subscribe, maybe leave a comment, share, all that usual nonsense? If you like this format, like the bestiary thing, let me know what other universes you might want me to make a bestiary about in the future. Or anything else really in the comments that you think I should know, like some future video ideas or something. It'd be much appreciated. Before I go, I did want to say thank you to my wife for helping me film the in-person bits. Those aren't always the most fun to create, and she was patient, so thanks, honey. Also, I want to tell you that this is a real crowbar. Like, I went to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and I bought a real crowbar. It was solid yellow when I bought it, so I had to strip it and then repaint it, but yeah, real crowbar. Pretty cool. Alright, well, that's all I got for you. If you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go play some Half-Life. Maybe Black Mesa. Yeah. See ya.